Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello and welcome to this episode number 97 of the Free Cities podcast. Well, it is a lovely early autumn day here this morning. I awoke to a beautiful wispy layer of mist in our valley. The Black Mountains peeping out of the top, still as a painting. I love that. Sounds of farm animals in the distance. It's hard to explain sometimes the feelings that rural England can trigger in me. I know everyone's country is different and uniquely beautiful in its own way, etc., but for me, the English countryside has the edge. It doesn't get much better than this. Mind you, of course, there is the Welsh countryside as well, not too far away. I know it very well, and so does today's guest. It's not an easy episode to introduce, really. This conversation is pretty fluid, quite random at times, hard to pin down, if you know what I mean. I wanted to get a sense of what a listener might pick up on, so I plugged all 3 hours of it into an AI and asked it to spit out the major keywords for me. Here's what it came up with. I found it quite interesting. Bitcoin, people, money, project, problem, work, good, risk, day, buy, timber, big, lads, volatility, point, life, stoic, pay, land, forestry. These are great words, and actually this set of words describes the general aura of my guest Ben perfectly. Ben Gunn, as he's known in Bitcoin circles, is somewhat of an elusive character, let's say, and I mean that in the best possible way. He's a grafter, he's a proof of worker, and he doesn't sit down and do many podcasts, so we were lucky in that respect. I drove up the Welsh borders from mine to his woodland estate last week to chat about a number of things. Originally sparked by a conversation I had with him in Prague a few months ago, where he told me he was starting a company in Prospera, of all places. What's the connection between a Welsh woodland and a Honduran free city, you may ask? Well, I certainly did ask anyway. We meander through a number of subjects during this chat, diving under the surface of Ben's forestry business and the ethics that underlie it, as well as his experiences living in Prospera for a month. We talk about the pandemic, about inflection points, and the broader implications of economic shifts. Ben is a former broker, and he uses the language of finance to frame many of the interesting concepts that we speak about, which I absolutely love. And I also got the chance to ask him to explain something called long vol. That's short for long volatility. Now, if you don't know what that means, I'm not about to explain it to you here, but it's something I've been grappling with for a while. Thankfully, Ben sorted me out during this conversation. So many thanks for that, and listen on for your own answers. Don't forget, liberty in our lifetime is just around the corner now, first until the 3rd of November. This year's theme is From Vision to Reality. You know us. We're interested in the actual builders of free cities. That's our thing. We love the dreamers and we love the philosophers, but we're builders at heart. 40 speakers, 12 projects from around the world, and over 350 free cities movers and shakers all in one place. And it's Prague. What's not to love? Now, if you're listening on Fountain or any other value for value platforms, drop us a boost. I'm building a strategic reserve, sat by sat. Everything is very much appreciated. In fact, you know what? If you leave us a comment with it, I'll read it out at the beginning of next week's show. Of course, you can contact me about anything we speak about here at podcast@free-cities.org. And in the meantime, well, why don't you just chuck some more wood on the fire, brew up a nice hot toddy, grab your favourite armchair and sit back, relax and enjoy my conversation with Ben Gunn.
Okay.
Right, we're recording. I'm going to set the scene first because it's important, and I've got sort of three things that I was thinking about on the way up here that I think will be a way into what we might end up talking about. First is to set the scene. We're in an undisclosed part of Wales, let's say, up a mountain in the middle of the woods at your project, let's call it that. I'll let you identify as much as you want about that. That's number one. That's the scene selection.
Okay.
Number two is there's an interesting connection between you, this place here in Wales, and Próspera in Honduras.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that connection because I think that's what the 21st century is all about. These really weird and unusual things that are going on. Because And you're definitely doing that, what you're doing here, which I'll be honest, I don't fully understand yet. I get a lot of it, but I think there's a 20-hour conversation to be had to really understand, like, everything. But from what I've seen and the kind of surface and level one and level two, I'm cottoning on to, right? But I know it goes a lot deeper than that. And I know that there's a connection with Prospera, which is really interesting. So obviously I want to talk about that. And that's number three. I was listening to a podcast you did. You don't do many podcasts.
No.
And I think you did one about 3-4 years ago with Max.
Yeah, 2021. I did one with Max, and then we followed up with one in Amsterdam about a year and a half later.
Right. Well, I listened to the first one in the car on the way up here, and it was interesting because I'd forgotten how intense it was being in COVID times, let's say. And you really get a sense of that listening to this thing.
Yeah.
Because and so I'm also interested then in you obviously you probably remember what you were talking about. I'm interested to hear your opinion on, after we've gone through the first two things, how they've moved in the last 4 years or 3 years since that time. Because what I find fascinating about the whole pandemic and COVID is it's as if it doesn't exist, and that's a weird and unsettling thing for me.
Bit of a tangent, and you should get used to those if you keep talking to me. There was a headline that went around a guy in New York recently, to give you an idea of how little people care about health now, who was saying, "Come and sit on my face for free." And there's disgusting people in New York who are sitting on this guy's face, and I just thought, aside from that being disgusting and whatever, just shows you like New York was where they were. Almost unrest about masks and social distances and hula hoops.
Wait a minute. Come and sit on my face for free, as in like
some
weird sexual deviance.
I don't even know if it was that. I think
art?
It probably was. Yeah, art or just a stunt. But for me, it's that these are such like ridiculous. They're farces. News is farce. But it's just nice to know what most people are reading as a diet, and it's nice. They are independently helpful to know where people's level of comfort is with health. And if we're sitting on people's faces in public again, I think the mask era is well and truly dead, isn't it?
Well, you say that, but I felt a pang of dread in my stomach about a month ago when somebody started mentioning monkeypox or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I did literally 10 minutes of research on the internet to discover that this was not an issue, right?
No.
Right? Yet someone on the news was talking about mask mandates, and my stomach just turned, and I thought, "Oh my God, is the mayhem about to start again?"
No, not in the same attack vector.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, it can't or it won't?
It can't and won't. It's just been done and it's been played out, and all this stuff just basically moves to the maximum point of pain in whatever society or culture it's being done in. And everyone's just had their existential dread about a virus, and they can't do it twice. They can't get that scared a second time in living memory.
So
it'll never happen again. There'll be panics and flights and all sorts of stuff and volatility. But But it's about not really having a setup that you don't really need to guess specifically what happens. You just know that it's going to be bumpy and stressful, and you just have preparation in your life to pick up whatever the next thing is. Is it a nuclear scare? Is it probably not?
Right.
Is it,
so you're not saying scares aren't going to happen, or
they can't repeat themselves. Like
just different types.
Yeah, it will rhyme with what we've just seen. Which this is all my personal. It's just that it's an aged population who are basically atheists, and they're scared of dying, and they haven't looked after themselves generally. And a flu came around the world. It came out scary from China, people falling over, and it got to them, and they were like, "Well, we need an out. We just need a way that we don't come to terms with not being very fit and being closer to the end of a natural life than the start." And we watched it. The decision was just burn the grandkids' health, make sure they're jabbed, and wrap everyone in cling film, and we're just terrified of dying. And that will just play itself out again. But the average voter, the average buyer, the median person in the Western economies is a little bit older, a little bit scared of dying, generally comfortable, maybe could afford to live from home, maybe could get the food shopping in. And all the working businesses have all blown up around me. And that's what they did.
So you don't think then that, say we get let's say we get a war incident next, which, it's not unlikely, is it? What happens in that scenario?
Well, again, the point is that we shouldn't even need to know what happens. It's just a matter of whatever does happen, we're best prepared for in as broad as possible scenarios. You can't buy enough insurance if you insured for every single outcome you're worried about and live profitably. You've got to hedge the major risks that are serious and know where you're carrying them. I don't know when there's going to be a war. There could never be one. It could all just go through in economics and just be another winter of discontent or whatever it is, and then come back. But the point is that it's in a critical state. All of this is, everybody's got the feeling that this is about to move. The ground's about to move under people's feet. It's a gut feeling. Everyone knows this is not sustainable, and that's going to result in change. And when it does, if you can prepare for change in general, you don't have to be as opinionated about where the world's going when it's at its hardest to guess.
And which brings us on nicely to what you're doing here. But before we go into that, I would say, you say that everyone's feeling this change coming. I don't think my mother has a clue. I don't think my father, various people I know have got a clue. I obviously feel it. I think you feel it for sure. How many people feel it?
Depends how old you are.
Is it?
If you've got to the end of the board, you've had a lovely quality of life. NHS in the UK has looked after you. Pensions paid you more than you put in. You're into an advanced age. Your mortgage is paid off. Kids are doing fine. We're all right, aren't we? It's not going to be our problem. And that's like a misweighted amount of the UK and Western economies of people that are kind of getting towards the end of their productive life and reaching the peak consumption, and are starting to now look around and say, actually, the £1 million house can't be sold 1% a year. And, oh gosh, aren't eggs expensive? And that was tomato ketchup. It costs £5. Maybe we need to downsize, and the asset-rich older demographics are going to have to sell to cover their costs, and they haven't got a market to sell it into because all of the people underneath them generationally, it's not as big a generation, it's not got any money. What
about, we were just discussing before this podcast, the local farm over there has just been sold to Morrison's.
Unbelievable. An hour before you came, I had a chap come up, one of the contractors, and we caught up on a couple of things, and there was a farm that had come up for sale. We look across the valley. It's up on the opposite side of a glacial ridge. It went up for £2 million. It had come out of a family that had it for 3 generations. It didn't sell, and then I've just found out it got took off the market. I don't know this, it's just gossip, but it tends to be right, that the supermarket chain Morrison's has bought this farm, lock, stock and barrel, farmhouses, agricultural, fences. It's all sheep farming, and the plan is to just plant it in wildflower. A 300-acre productive farming unit is going to now be grass.
For ESG.
For a supermarket that sells eggs, milk, butter,
And it's
from
all
Central
about
Europe.
ESG, all about fixing the...
There'll be some sort of twisted logic where they're running a type of double entry accounting for how much carbon they emit. And they'll say, well, we still want to run diesel HGV. And we feel bad about that. So we've bought a productive part of the economy and replanted it so we can say that it burps up the right amount of oxygen to CO2. It's just so gross.
It is really, gross is a good way of describing it.
It's just not right. On the face of things, it's just obviously a misallocation of capital. And you've got to have the time to step back and say, that is just not the right order of things. If we're just trying to organise materials to get to the places that they're next most useful, we're not in a normal free market economy. This is all well off now.
I'm going to, I just want to, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I want to briefly introduce you because you've had a colourful life like many of us.
Bloody hell.
But just roughly speaking, this is what I know. Brief military career cut short by injury, then on to working in the city, trading options, etc.
Well, I wasn't a trader. I was a broker. So,
right.
To use a strained analogy, if it was a casino, I would take the bets of the big bettors, and I'd take my percent. And it would be like, well, what do you think? Is it going to go on red or is it going to go on black? And I'd go, okay, according to the jobs data and the price action's doing this, and we've had some big flows in the morning. So it was to encourage the amount and frequency of transactions. It was pure sales. There was no proprietary investment decisions that I ever made. But you did have to be pretty quick, and you were on the terminals executing trades for people who were either hedging or were having an opinion on the market, and they'd build a position and trade it through you, which is kind of a bit old-fashioned now.
Right.
To have a voice broker, but it goes on because it's a human business still.
Okay, so, and you made a bunch of money, got out of that, went travelling, ended up being...
I didn't make lots of money, but it was a London job.
Well,
and at the top of that
average
game,
person, I would say you probably did all right.
It's like everything. In the pro leagues, 80% of people earn 20% of the low end of the incomes, and there's a few people who are just mutants financially, and they're 2 rows down from you. But
you got out on account of, I suppose, mental health issues and physical issues. Was it?
It came at the same time. It was a very intense job. It's not the type of job you can do half of and make half the money from. You're there in the chair or you're not, and you're out. And when I was in, completely in, because I felt at that time I hadn't gone through university. I'd crashed out of a military training stream right at the end of a point where it would have been secure for years, and I hadn't gone to uni because at that age I just wanted to get straight into something. So when I came out into London, I landed a job by saying I'd come through a commissioning course, which is normally a grad course, but I'd done it as a direct entrant at 17 or 18. And so they took a flyer on me at the bank and said, well, if you've done that grad course, that the implication is that your grad quality, we can take you on as a grad. Did a couple of technical exams and got in. But for that entire time in London, I hadn't got the credentials that normally go against these job roles that I was doing. And I always just got the sense I was going to get a tap on the shoulder and say, we needed you when we needed you, but you've kind of got in through the back door and we just don't need you anymore. And the markets for that entire time weren't rosy. So I just started to crack the books and try and backfill what I hadn't learned at uni in the quiet spots in the market. So I did technical analysis, diplomas, and all your exams you need to be an execution broker anyway, and then just really started to get into it and try and protect myself from the possibility that they just don't want you anymore. And I started to build my own trade ideas. But what happened, and the reason I'd left, was at the time those opinions were going out and people were picking them up and enjoying what they were. I'm learning more about it, but I'm self-led. So I'm learning the financial system from answering my own questions. So I'm not going into the red brick reading lists. I'm reading Creature from Jekyll Island in 2011 on a quiet spell in the afternoon of a market, and I'm coming to these conclusions that it's absolutely the biggest lie and obvious scam. And I'm on a row of 10 people that still have a mortgage and still have kids and still want to go on holiday, and they don't want to hear this. It's like, we're doing great. Like, we're right near the money markets. We work hard. We make good money. And, stop being a Debbie Downer. But I just couldn't get into work and motivate myself unless it was something that it was actual hard work. And it is hard, but you're not making the money from the hard work. That's just, I felt now that that's just the busy work. What you actually do isn't doing anything valuable in the economy. But it is hard. But I couldn't get up at 5:30, 5 o'clock anymore. And there was a period of time when the health stuff, late 20s, there's only so many nights out and stressful days and it was just, that was happening at the same time. I really just wasn't into it anymore. And I left kind of with it all happening at the same time.
And you left and ended up in, is it right? You ended up in Thailand, which led to you becoming a deep sea diver.
Yeah, but there was a hop in between that led me into Bitcoin, because when you leave a front office role, I don't know if it's the case anymore, but they think you're going to move to a different competitor. So there's always something in the contract that holds you at home for 6 months. You're not allowed to talk to your clients. You're not allowed to talk to other banks. You just got to sit at home. It's literally gardening leave. They'll pay you, but if you're caught or found speaking to a customer, it's not good. And I had no intention of moving on, but they weren't to know that. So I booked a coding boot camp in London and did a 12-week, what they call like a zero to hero thing, because I'd never been able to do the coding from the broken desk. We'd always just gone off spreadsheets. It was actually quite old-fashioned. Never had the time to do it, and went out and just made use of my time while someone was paying me just to consolidate the London life. And so then got into Bitcoin at the end of that, just because you'd done a coding course. I can read about Bitcoin, so I did enough, and that was enough for me to really get into it and be sold on it quite quickly. And then I went out to Thailand and just initially started to just be recreationally just learning to dive. It came out of a fear of like claustrophobia, and I just wanted to grip it. But once you cleared that, it's actually a superb sport, and I just loved it out there for that period of time. Great people, great expats, beautiful country. And I stayed there for 3 or 4 years and just did everything I could possibly do on diving syllabus while Bitcoin was
pumping
and dumping and God knows, forking. That was fun.
And then, without going too much into that, no, I'm just painting the picture here because I think all these different things led to what's happening here now. And I think I get a sense that that's quite important for, like military training, financial understanding, grafting, and then facing fears, deep sea diving, whatever, has led to this point.
Well, after I'd decided in Thailand that it was kind of done. I like to just learn a lot about it and then get very bored and leave. And I've done that frequently now, enough to know that it'll happen again. But after Thailand, I'd booked to come home, just back to the UK and have a bit of time off and then pick whatever I want to do next. But in that time, there was an awful event that happened in South Thailand, and a boat had been lost at sea, and people had been lost on that boat. And I was about to leave, and the types of divers that would be good to do that had mostly travelled north to rescue the Buffalo. Is it the Buffalo Cave boys? They were in the north.
The one they made the film out of.
Yeah, so that drew all of the incredible story. But from I was living in South Thailand, which is more of a recreational hub, and the north is more for the Buddhist retreats and the yoga. And these caves aren't for diving, except a very small community of people can dive these caves. And a lot of them are based in Phuket. They make money on the training, and then they do their own projects. And these guys are orders of magnitude better than a diver who's got a PADI license, say. Anyway, they got drawn up to the caves to help in the initial rescue and didn't mostly make it back down for what happened in Phuket. All the attention in the media, the global attention was up there, but a boat with 100 people had gone down in Phuket in a storm, and it was an absolute tragedy. Disgusting story, and it was the last thing I did in Thailand was, because I'd done my qualifications, I was still a volunteer. I went and did a 2-day recovery of those, and then that was it. 1 day left in Thailand, and I flew back and really took all of the strain from that with me. Didn't really happen at the time, really processed what had happened. So got back here and started acting like a prat, just not myself. And part of that was buying a forest because I just wanted some space, and it came up cheap near my house.
This one here?
This one, where we're sat. It was just a climbing crag off about 100 metres from where we're sat. And I bought it. And I didn't realise that a lot of the forestry on here needs to be actively managed, and it's actually a huge undertaking. And so that was kind of decided for me. It was either sell it for a loss, because everyone else knew about forestry, not to buy it, or fix it. And I can't do nothing about it. I've got to attend to the wood here. So it was perfect. I just needed something really difficult and all-consuming to focus on after all of that, which was shit.
Right. How's the climbing going here, by the way?
I'm a climber. I've done my quals when I was a kid. I've never climbed it. Never had the chance. I get climbers on. We get really good groups and professionals come and bring students, and I don't open it to the public. We've got too much forestry operations, but the way you negotiate on the land is you can ultimately stomp your feet and say, no, where's my land? And you can't come on here. But really the negotiation is to get people on who are good quality, low risk, and can follow some simple instructions about how to come on and off. So the climbing is active. It's a bit of a off-piste place to come and climb. It's like the French ski resort that hasn't got a lot of kilometres on it. It's only got like one blue and one red. You come out of your way, it's probably not worth getting to. But if you're there, it's nice to climb. It's got a 3-star classic on it. It's a proper crag.
You better explain what this is then. What this is. Can you sum it up in a start with the kind of, I don't know. I don't even know where you start, to be honest, because it's a physical place. It's part of a larger project, and you can't really describe one without the other.
No, it's really difficult to describe, and it's been the single biggest problem with the project, is to just try and get it out of my head and get people that maybe don't have enough time to really just grok it very quickly and really see the value in what I've done. But really, from the start of that initial mistake, I'd bought a piece of forestry, and the forestry that was planted in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was planted like a crop. It was planted in rows. The trees don't rise and fall like year to year. They grow like corn. And if you leave them, as you leave corn in the field, eventually it's just stalk snaps and it falls over. Now, the problem is this was planted in a quarry. So all these 45-degree slopes have this timber, and they're holding the soil in. And if they were to fall in the way we described there, all the soil would run off, and it's a cliff. So it's got to come out, it's got to be felled, but we don't have very good access. And so that's those problem sets at the start of what this project was to me, was to attend to these big problems and break them down into not just a solution, but a way that those big problems actually become big advantages. And since then, I've just peeled away at those initial problems over, what we're into, 5 or 6 years of just slowly working at it, and an opportunity to buy a new plot comes up. We can do that, and then that means we can afford a machine for that scale, and it's just constant. It's like a huge Rubik's Cube. And we're now at a point where that's all been done rather quietly without any announcements or commentary. And it's led into businesses that are connected to timber, but can go more towards Bitcoiners and the Bitcoin network at a sort of commodity and physical layer, as opposed to like a new piece of software that we all want to use. And the use of the land, which after this is all done is an amenity plot.
Why would you say that you didn't just flog it when you realised what was ahead? Did you understand what you were letting yourself in for?
No, I didn't do any due diligence. I didn't visit it.
So why'd you do it?
I was just completely in a tailspin. I'd come back from Thailand. I'd saved. I'd made some money in London. I didn't spend a lot of it in Thailand, and I'd worked and covered my costs as a matter of principle to not live on savings. But it never made money. I came back and I didn't have a house, primary residence, and this place looked suspiciously cheap. And I was just in a place where I just wanted to be on my own at the time, and I bought it.
You wanted a mountain?
Well, it's just weird how it came up close to home, and it was in my budget, and it looked like just something I could come and bring the dog to. And
I did exactly the same thing
That's interesting that we got into land in the same way.
Well, no, I did it around 2002. I bought. I was trying to think on the way up here. It was 15 or 20 acres of woodland in the Wye Valley, and it was overlooking the river where I'd been as a kid. It was really poignant. And all I wanted to do was to go there at the weekends and just chop wood and stack it and stuff. It was pure antidote to the life I was living in London.
It sounds, I don't know what it is. I don't know if you can put it in a bottle, but I had the same. I came back from Thailand. I was processing stuff that was just gross. And I had no chance of just being able to just keep going and being the same person. And I didn't know that at the time. But it started off going around everybody's friends, family, everybody just going into their garden, say, I'll do all your gardening for free. And then just putting a fire in the middle of the garden, like on a little incinerator, and just sitting there. And I just wanted to sip a beer. I wanted music. I didn't really want to catch up with the family particularly. And I was just like really struggling. And then when this came along, the initial mistake was that the active forestry on that I didn't take into account in the slightest. And so from that point, it was probably a mark-to-market loss. But I couldn't just sit in here and relax either, which is what I'd expected to do. I'd come in here and I was just as restless here as I was anywhere else. The attractive part from that point on was the amount of toil it would take. The effort. It was just stupid amounts of effort, but I needed something to knacker me, to completely exhaust me and take all my focus away. It was like a ballast thing. It was just something I could pour all my energy into that wasn't bothering anybody else, and it was going to get me out of a problem with the land. But it took a lot longer than I expected, but the results are looking more exciting than when I first set out. I'm way through break even.
Okay, what about the second order effects then, the results? Because what we've spoken about before I started recording is almost nothing. Well, it's to do with the timber trade.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, this is a large forest that you're basically mining for for wood, and then selling it in a network which is very specifically of your choosing. But it's much more than that. Can you kind of sum up the bit that I'm missing there?
Yeah, it's hard to explain because it goes across so many subject matters, but the governing principle across it all, if I was trying to explain it very shortly, is that we started off in the forest with a felling timber production operation that lost money. And it lost money because the site's access is poor, and it meant that modern machinery can't come on and do the unit cost of timber. So the access was a problem. And then also because it's on a 45-degree slope, these machines like to run on flat ground. So we have instead here to get two men, who are increasingly hard to find, sawmen, who used to just rove around the valley and do chainsaw work for tonnages. They don't exist anymore, the machines. So they're rare birds, and when you get them here, they need two guys in the woods, day rates, felling the trees, and then they get winched up the cliff you've just seen to roadside. So it's a much more expensive process than forestry. So the sawmill that we've got up here breaks the volumes down, and it increases the price that we can sell the timber at because there's a multiple. So once it's in boards, it goes from a tonnage rate, which is crap, I can't make money, into a sawmill product, local economy, fencing, cladding, beams, boards, all of that stuff. And it marks it up enough to wipe its feet. And where it's got to now when you're sitting here is that we've gone one step further and have developed timber framing from the sawmill, which can create structures that people could live in, or shepherd's huts all the way up to 2-story buildings with a timber framing format. And then the next thing on the Bitcoin side is that there's an emerging network of physical locations and nodes, all under different projects and all under different names. And I'm sure there's a whole political thing about which one's best. But basically places that are freedom-minded, who have gone off the academic papers and are actually applying this in various locations. And timber, the way I can make it up here, can be very highly engineered. It's actually quite valuable. And then because of that, can ship quite a long way before it starts to lose break even again. And so there's a lot of timber here, more than we can use to build on the site. I don't want to sell it at the wrong price into the market for money that I don't need just yet. I'd rather save it, select some locations and take it into these new locations and build with the timber. And then that way the timber is going into places with values that match me, as opposed to people buying that I just need their money and they'd probably be opposite me and politically and everything else.
So where does Prospera come into all this then?
Prospera, I had a period of time off and I went round El Salvador to visit with Nathan Day, who runs the BTC Maps project. Has he been on?
He was on this podcast a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Wherever I've been, he's always bloody been, Nathan. He's everywhere, and he's an absolute beast. He's on a lot of stuff. But we went around for about 10 days in El Salvador, and I met a guy at one of the conferences called Dusan.
Dusan Matusco. He's also been on this podcast as well.
He's just one of these guys. I must have known each other from Twitter, but I met him in a conference in El Salvador, and he just started talking about Prospera. You should come. So that was in October. 1st of January, I went and spent a month in Prospera, basically just on Dusan's recommendation, and spent a month in the ZA and looked at how it actually works in practice and what I could use it for, and went away with, a non-zero amount of exciting stuff, and it's built up into some potential use cases for the land where I can bring timber across and build, but no pre-announcements. And yeah, it's just another location potentially to send the high value stuff.
But what about are you allowed to talk about the company and yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't know whether that was something that was off, like what, because it's not just about that.
No.
So explain to me how Prospera is, how you're utilizing the Prospera platform with your business over here.
There's basically two things that Prospera does that nowhere else can. So when I visited, it was really just like we did. Like the reason I went to El Salvador is just to see if it was just Twitter BS or whether what was stated was actually the general experience when you're there. It's hard to fake something for a month.
Was it?
No.
No,
and it was actually.
Do you want to give a quick summary of what you found in El Salvador? Because that's also interesting.
The same thing is that it wasn't BS, and that we went from every part of the country across 10 days, and every single part of it had part integration with Bitcoin, but that it was an incredibly safe place to go, an incredibly beautiful place to go, and a very tempting place to go and live. And I'm very bullish on it. It's more from the visit than before, where I'm a bit of a cynic. So it was a fantastic trip on its own, and there's development land out there as well, but of course that's all gone bid after all of the Bitcoin and global stage and big boost in GDP. That's just come through in people buying ransom strips in El Salvador. So there's been a price spike. I don't think it'll retrace, but there's no special reason to point it there. Now where Prospera comes in, I just think that for the sake of a month visiting, I was just stunned at how well built as a product and a concept, what they'd actually achieved. It's not a pitch. They do have a deployed part of the constitution that carves them out as a separate jurisdiction, and it does separate them monetarily. And that's massive. And the legal structure that I've navigated along just to set a small business up, a concept business, worked fantastic in a very regulated product. In insurance, 18 months in the UK, maybe 6 figures, and all the uncertainty. Whereas over there, they replace the regulatory structures we're used to with insurance, and they just need to make sure that everybody knows where the risks are and where they're born and who pays for that. And so it went very quickly.
Is it right to say that you needed an insurance product that you couldn't get, so you started your own insurance company?
Yes.
Is that basically what it is?
Yes.
What was so how does it fit in with this business? What are you insuring, for example?
Well, insurance is one of those financial products that's come to be complicated, but is actually just very simple. It's you want protection from an event that you can't afford to go through without the protection. Modern insurance companies don't just do that. They reinvest the float. So when you pay your premium to whoever, they don't just leave that in the bank against all of the car claims they expect for that year. They invest it, and they lever it, and they send it all around the world, and they push it. But the insurance I was after was for a diving pilot program that we were going to initially launch on Nostr.
Hold a minute.
Is it going to be a series?
You can't just say launch on Nostr. We do talk about Nostr on this podcast, but I always like to get people to kind of first say what Nostr is. Before we start going on about it. Maybe we'll come back to that. Let's
I've gone native on Nostr, so for me it's like the what is water.
I know. You have to remember that 99% of normal people don't use Nostr.
Yeah. No, it's just a protocol that's sort of come up around in the Bitcoin community. I hate that phrase, community, but it's coming around. The Bitcoiners have been interested in Nostr. And it's come through as a simple protocol that can't be censored. And the initial use cases have been things for like social media clones. The YouTubes, the Twitters, the Substacks have been copied, but with a relay network backend instead of a server in San Jose. And that's it. And the protocol doesn't have any code in it. And there are all these different things that you can pass between these relays, and they recognize them as objects. And socials have been the first thing, but the very next thing will be Internet of Things and digital identity.
And yours was in connection with digital identity?
Mine was in connection with digital identity because when I was working in Thailand as a Paddy pro, I had criticisms of Paddy, not necessarily of the company itself, but of the model of private training. It's not a license.
For people that don't know, Paddy is...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
PADI stands for what?
Oh, God, I've really instructed. Professional Association of Diving Instructors.
Right. It's how you get
don't put me on the
qualified as a diver, isn't it? And it has many levels.
It's private. It's a private company that has a franchise model with its instructors and its locations. And it has a proof of stake model. You do activity and you get the PADI private badge and you pay whatever that is. That rent would be £100 maybe for an open water. And it's about 20% of the overall cost of a dive. Now, if you took the credentialing part of that and ran it along Nostr and placed your NPub as like the PADI headquarters, we could just have an alternative foundation with similar standards in diving. And when an instructor can prove it's gone out with a student to do these skills and it adds up to a qualification, that NPub Oracle with responsibilities and a fiat surface that it makes it accountable signs off. And that's free. You don't have to charge a rent.
I'm going to try and translate what you just said because there's a lot of technical words there.
I know. I'm sorry.
On Nostr, you can have digital identity, which is unique to each person. And you can therefore vouch for someone. Say you're someone who's well known as a version of Paddy. You can literally, it's like you're vouching for that particular identity.
Yes, you can sign digitally. Yeah. So Nostr has a similar format to Bitcoin wallets, which are things that are now becoming more familiar to people. So you have a public address and everyone can see that. And then you have a private signing key to, in the case of Bitcoin, send UTXOs. And in the case of Nostr, to sign posts at the moment. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing you could sign. You could sign anything. You could sign a contract. You could sign your will. You could sign something to prove that you were there at a place or that you're in that photo or you whatever. And it's your proof. It's like that ring on your finger that stamps the wax. And that's the power of Nostr, is that that's now going to build up into reputation. People are going to be able to see events. They're going to be able to see you interact with other MPubs and you both had a good time and you didn't get stitched up by the other guy. And you're going to have a Nostr-based Uber score. And then when I meet you, I don't really need to ask 3 friends. Just scan your MPub and you're a good egg and welcome. And
I noticed it already being used on some kind of Nostr app stores. When you come to download something, it shows you who in your network vouches for that thing in a way. So it's a way of kind of signing things off.
If you've seen the GitHub member private page, it shows like a little square tile of all the times the person's pushed code per day. And if you imagine that type of metric on an NPub, it could show whether someone's a bot or whether someone's been mostly in the UK, if they've had a massive bust up. There's no rumor anymore. It's just find out like what was published and when, and you can and the importance of this for insurance is that at the moment, if I'm a dive instructor, I'm insured under diving. And if I've not worked like I haven't for 5 years, all I need to do is log into Paddy again, pay them $600, and I'm an instructor again. No refresher, no nothing. And my insurance price reflects that, and the model reflects that amount of risk, and it spreads out across all of the really low-risk instructors and all of the really high-risk instructors, and it's a flat rate. So if you apply insurance to a Nostr MPub and you're an instructor, you can show you've dived 300 dives that year, and that each interaction with a student's been a positive one. That's a far cheaper insurance quote to give to an instructor than just guessing what an average instructor's mischief can get up to in a big barrel of random instructors.
But presumably someone in the normal world is underwriting this insurance. How do you explain to them what you're doing here? Because how do they risk assess that?
Well, there's lots of ways of assessing risk. Like I said, it's complicated in complicated insurance, but in basic insurance, you need a general fund that underwrites the risk that you write out on a given day. So we're using a diving example. The risk that we were going to try and still intend to trial is that you go out on a dive, and if you come up and you're injured as a result of the dive, there's a couple of risks specific to diving, that there's a large payment to make for that type of treatment. Normally people go and do it, it's expensive, but they're fine. And that was the risk we wanted to insure. So on basics, if it's called insurance failure, the inability to pay the risk that someone's bought from you, the ultimate ability to pay that risk out is that if you've got 10 divers on a boat and you've insured them all for a capped amount on a contract for X £1,000, and that's payable against them being sick in the water, then ultimately the insurance company will pay out until it's gone. But the customer will have 1-for-1 matched risk against what they're doing. And that's not what insurance companies do. That's why natural disasters don't pay out. Because if all the insurance companies paid out on that, they wouldn't have any money left. They're bust.
So what was the actual thing you needed to do in Prospera with this then?
Well, I went out there as a dive instructor knowing that it was one of the best reefs in the world and that it was a freedom project that had some Bitcoiners in it. There's a Bitcoin center. There was a scuba shop guy, so he's doing my old job and he's a Bitcoiner. So that was worth a trip. And having spent the month there, it was about working out, well, if I had a business here, what would it look like? And how do I test the regulatory system, the legal system that they've set up? And I want to have a go on it. Like, let's see what we can get. And I fell on top of insurance because the training and certification idea with Nostr, the barrier to doing that without insurance was that there's a catch-22 in diving that protects the incumbent training providers. And it's along the lines of, you can't get your certification system signed off until it's been running for 2 years. And you say, well, why would I judge the quality of training in the water after 2 years of doing it to establish it's safe? So there's a catch-22 in like how to establish yourself as a system, and you need to self-insure. So an insurance company wouldn't give a quote to a new scuba certification system. So you have to self-insure, and then the choice becomes, well, do I go to a broker to give me a really bespoke, expensive thing, and then every student we get on to do it, it's an extra X of cost? Or do we just do that part of it ourselves using Nostr and use Bitcoin as a way to pay and do it on a really small, really contained pilot and see if it works? And that's what...
And do you have to, like, who sort of signs your thing off? Like, what regulations do you need to comply to, for example?
In Prospera?
Yeah.
What happens, it depends on the business that you've got. And remember, this is me, a user of Prospera.
Sure.
Not a Prospera expert. I'm sure they'd say, Ben, not quite like that. But the gist is, as I understand it, it offers a place for you to do business. You can set up various company formats that we're used to, partnerships and limiteds. And they fall into two broad buckets. One is non-regulated and one is regulated. Regulated examples, things like mining, toxic waste. You know, you can imagine the stuff that they have to cover as a legal side, all the corner cases, but it's really anything quite heavy industry. Financial is regulated, and obviously medical. So there's a regulatory side that asks more, and we'll talk about that a bit more. If it's non-regulated, like a scuba shop or a hotel, a benign business model, you just open up the business and register it in Prospera and go through the system. It's actually quite a pleasant login. If you're logging into HMRC or IRS, it's nice to log into Prospera. They've built it out nicely. And you can do your business from there, whether that's tech consultant or startup. And it's become popular with biomedical because they can do risk managed things there that would otherwise cost too much red tape. And so that Prospera's been attractive to the biomedical industry. Not that I have a clue about that. And financial services, Bitcoin. And then the flag theory, free cities people, obviously, as well.
Critique it then for me. You've been a month in Prospera. And you've seen the workings of it. What's not working there?
I think it's changed since I've been there because I'm staying in touch with the people. But like I was saying to you before the podcast.
How long ago were you there?
I was there in January for a month.
This year, 2024?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I'm going to critique it because I like it so much. If it was crap, And if it was all marketing and glitter and no substance, I'd just not talk about it. But I like it a lot, and I've got projects and plans for it, and I like the people. But if it's critical, at the time I arrived, they'd put on like a big event, like a long-running conference kind of event, and the staff were quite distracted. So I was just this little diminutive, is it a real business? I was sort of back of the queue type of thing. And I was just trying to get more information. And I think it's a strange problem to have in this space, but the product's built out amazingly well. I mean, the product's done. They've got what they need. I think where they fell short, particularly with me, anecdotally, was in marketing, because I'd never heard of them before. It took someone living there to tell me to go, who I trust, and I went. And then, fights to meet people, get the information and get the updates of what's going on, and work would an entrepreneur best be. And throughout that whole time, I was just moaning in the right way back and saying, look, if I was the only person coming on here, I'd have gone by now. Marketing, you need to do a bit more marketing, because some of the stuff is hard to explain. And it's amazing, but no one's got a month to spend here.
Do you know, but how would they do that? I mean, I've observed their marketing, and it's not out of the ordinary. It's quite,
Well, then maybe it goes somewhere across marketing. And if you were to say, if an app has a user experience, the platform would have a user experience as well. And I think it's one of those things where the product's been built and the center of the project is in product development. We are making our legal system to stand the test of time, and it'll be done well. But it's that translation from a lawyer's defensive product mindset into one of an entrepreneur who could spend their risk anywhere and make it clear that this is a better place than virtually anywhere else to start a business. And it's not always clear what was going on there or what the next step was, because I wanted to put insurance through as a use case, and it took a while for me to I just wanted to explain what my idea was and just be told where to go with it. But it was a little bit more like self-service, and I don't know how many people might have just not bothered, got to a certain point.
That's
and said,
probably a function of the fact that it's a frontier space, isn't it? I mean,
you
like
just don't have
most
time.
people don't. I don't think most people know. Most people don't operate in this way, do they? Mm-hmm. It's a flagship project.
It's an unbelievably ambitious and well built out project, and I don't envy the people that are getting up every day to make sure that they're loyal to that vision, because it's a massive vision. But I have a position to offer on how I've come through, and it was good. Pleasantly surprised. It was just a little bit harder to navigate through at that time than it could have been, very simply. And I got where I needed to get to in the end, and I like it so much that I'm putting it into all my plans. I just want them to be better known for what they've achieved in the midst of all the other stuff that grabs our attention. They've done a massive job, sort of silently, and they just need more people to go and frequent it and use it as a base for a holiday or a 90-day stay, or go and put some roots down. And that's going to mean a lot of explanations to people, because it took quite a lot of active investigation, me cutting around and trying to speak to as many people for me to really start to get it.
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
It's not an easy job. I'm not saying that doing something basic.
I think one of the small problems with these kind of projects is that initially the kind of people you're going to attract are not averse to risk, obviously, but also you get a lot of people that dip their toes.
Yeah.
And that's not good for long-term business, obviously, and you'll always have those kind of transient people frequenting places like that.
Yeah.
Because it's, the digital nomads of this world. And that's a bit of a problem in the beginning.
Well, I looking at it completely, I've not got any experience or background in these things, but if I just dropped into their project, you're right. Like there's different categories of user for that. And if you did a proper marketing workshop and did a real amount of time saying, where's our market? Who do we compete with, if anybody? You break out customer profiles. It's like a graduate level exercise. You say, well, who are the different types of people that are going to come through here, and what would they respond to differently? And then you form a marketing strategy and a messaging strategy. And one of them might be the Nomad Nigel. They do like funny ones. It's Nomad Nigel. He's 28. He's a junior software dev. He works on a contract and he likes in the outdoors. He's come for 90 days and he rents. He can't afford to buy property, but he likes to come for a small amount of the year. And that's one of our customers. And we measure that success by how many Nomad Nigels on an average stay a year do we get on. And that's like the longer you can get someone to stay is more of the success of the project. Your duration, if you bring in your family and live in there full time, that's a full home run because you've got people to commit in the highest possible way. Where the least is just more visitors for a conference, which is another good conversion. You're hoping they'd go, like it, go home. It grows on them. They come back, do 2 more months. And so they just need the city part building out now. They're looking for that group to come on and take it from where they've took it to, which is incredible, and finish parts of it off and fill it out. They want the momentum to go past them, and they just focus on maintaining the platform on which all these other layers of businesses are sort of done. And that's the responsibility of the residents. They just manage that core.
Which is also a catch-22 situation because they want other people to build it out in a way.
Yeah, and this is where the entrepreneur messaging is so important, is that there is an opportunity there. But if you're a beady-eyed money allocator and you're looking for reasons to say no to things, it is a difficult one to sort of overcome. It's like, well, what do you want? You want me to come and risk all my business here, and you want me to build here, and is that not all just part of the risk of the project just getting swatted by the government or whatever the latest thing was? It's difficult. But I think there could be a lot more about that.
I mean, that's unfortunately the main news currently about Prospera is that the government of Honduras have repealed the ZA law, which theoretically shouldn't affect them because they have robust legal.
But again, if the marketing basics are in, your messaging it for that is that you're not responding to what the government have just said defensively, which is what someone defending something they like would do. You do things that initiate something in the press as part of an active management of your PR and your marketing. And it would be the other party defending or having to respond to something you've done positively. And they do lots of positive stuff. They don't blow their own trumpet enough is really what it comes down to. They don't explain how much of a developed project that is compared to anything else I've seen in the space. They are open for business. Something that just
came up a couple of days ago was a video that sort of like a news or organisation had put together, one of those kind of
rebel news,
something like that,
dispatches. I know.
And it was, loosely speaking, it was billionaire tech people want to make their own cities, kind of thing.
This is basic marketing, like defensive marketing. What is the weakness? SWOT analysis. The weakness is in building something different from a local population. There's a narrative of exclusivity that can be built without a lot of effort, and that needed to be done in a sort of more of an engineered way onto a risk register. It needed to be discussed, and I think that's one big problem there, is that the better they get, the more exclusive they'll look if they don't ingratiate themselves and integrate properly with the island. And it's a very big problem because they plan to go to other parts of the country, all different parts of the world, and they're going to have the same problem. You've got to reconcile with who you're around. And the truth is everyone in Roatan would be welcome to go to Prospera. And they do loads of local stuff. Dusan is into the schools doing Bitcoin online. I delivered an online safety thing to some kids, like how not to get, taken advantage of online or what not to film or don't get caught filming. And there's loads of stuff going on. The quantity of it is just frustratingly undervisible, if you know what I mean. And that's the criticism of it. It's nothing to do with what it is. I don't think it's a scam or I've kicked the tires, I don't like it. It's the opposite. It's just it lies quite a lot of it lies under the surface.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with all those projects, because it's so easy to frame it in this sense, is this kind of neo-colonialism thing.
Yeah.
And if you believe in projects like that, it's very easy to offer the opposite,
Well, you lose your self-awareness because you're so in love with the vision that how could anyone possibly see this as wrong? And that's perfectly nice, reasonable position to have, and everything they've done is so good intended. It's intended for the exact people they think they're exclusive to, which is probably the best opportunity those people have ever had to improve the quality of their lives has never come from the government. They're next door to something that has got some of the best tech and biomedical businesses on the planet coming there for refuge. And it's all to the advantage of the locals to be involved in that in any way possible. And it's just the political advantage that by not having their own narrative has been filled with, oh, look at them up the hill. It's just so obvious and it's just so easy to address.
That's ironic.
They're excellent in the local community.
It's ironic though, isn't it? Because you've kind of implanted yourself here and have had similar problems integrating with the locals, let's say. And I don't think it's a good idea to sort of deny that these are problems, because they are.
That's right.
Like I forget the name of the little village next to Prospera. Crawfish.
Yeah.
Almost certainly, if I lived in Crawfish and I'd been there my whole life, I would be scared of what's going on next door. 100%. And I might even not want it. I know we all look at it from, it's almost like we're all economists. We go, well, it's going to raise the living standards of blah, blah. But maybe living in Crawfish and fishing and doing that is your thing. And you don't want this great thing being built next door. All right, you may get a good hospital out of it, which is probably the best thing for you, but it is going to ruin your kind of, your life. Here you've got the problem of, okay, no one wanted to tackle this project. Now you are, but you've got to get the wood out of here. People don't like you driving trucks past their house, blah, blah, blah. blah. Yeah. There's always the question is, do we just say, well, look, you've got to break a few eggs to make an omelette? Or what is it, the greater good? Like, where's the moral right, wrong kind of,
Well, in a let's say a culture in my entire life of sort of ambiguous property rights, like if we were going off what was right academically, if you own something, you can do what you want with it. Yeah. Someone buys a house next to you and they want to put a pink castle on, well, that's their house. And if you don't like it, you can sell and move it. Like that would be that's my ideological answer. But in reality, in a fiat project like the one I'm in a forest in the middle of, let's call it socialist UK economy, mixed economy, if we're going to be diplomatic. You've got options whether you can either be right or you can win. And if you're right, you can take your idea and stomp your feet and alienate everybody. And you can be the guy down the pub with the failed forestry business that was right and everyone else is horrible. Or you can just negotiate and you go exactly to the person that, whoever that impediment is or whatever that problem is, and you just go to them and you just say, what can you take out of this? Given that I'm going to take trees out that you don't want to have out, what else? If that's the worst thing that happens, how could we make that less bad? What in that are you worried about? And sometimes they might say, well, you're going to take all the trees out and then all the rocks are going to fall into my kitchen. And it's like, well, we're going to replant so the stumps hold the soil, and then when the new trees come through, they hold the soil. And they go, oh, okay. And that is what, if all you call that was marketing on stakeholder engagement, how many things in Crawfish that people go to bed worrying about are a matter of a 2-minute clarification?
I'm not even sure there are a huge amount of problems there.
Well, there's people in the middle who are politically served by seeing Prospera painted in a certain light in public because it's just so wildly successful and obviously helpful to people who just want to live freely. That if you're in the Castro government, I think, or the political party at the left there, no one else is talking about Prospera. They're too busy working to talk about themselves. So we'll make some stuff up and let them chase that muck around the world while we keep setting the narrative. It's about winning the firefight. They've got to have their own narrative and independent opinion.
Well, the interesting thing about the ZAs in Honduras is everyone talks about Prospera and no one talks about Morazan, because Morazan doesn't suit the narrative.
What's Morazan? Because that's the first time I might have even heard that word. That's really interesting, yeah.
Morazan is, there are 3 ZA projects. One of them's not really, I don't know much about it, but from what I understand, it's more of a kind of special economic zone type scenario.
There's a port on the mainland.
Right, that's one. I think that might be it. Morazan is a blue-collar ZA, as opposed to Honduras, which you might call, as opposed to Prospera, which you might call a kind of white-collar.
Well, I think it's a tertiary, it's tourism, and it's service economy.
Okay, but the model in Morazan is a wealthy guy has bought and built a place, and he charges very reasonable rates to people who are often mostly working in the ZA. And
Great.
exactly, and they're all blue collar Hondurans.
I think blue collar as an economic trend is one to play in our lifetimes. I think that the white collar, blue collar spread in pay and respect has probably reached its height.
For sure.
And AI is going to come in and undermine the bits of the white collar trade that used to be manual and human. And the blue collar, you're still going to need someone to come and know how to use a digger. And the spread's going to tighten up. And there's not going to be as many blue-collar people as there is blue-collar work.
Well, it's arguably, I mean, it already has. I mean...
It's awful.
There
Try
was
and find a tradesman.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Your average tradesperson, 250 to 300 a day, right? I don't know what they're like here, probably a bit less. But around where I live, that's what you're looking at. I mean, I had a plumber come in for a half day the other day, and the bill was best part 400 quid, right? I know, it's annoying. It was something I couldn't do myself.
This what Nathan Day would say is, "Don't make me tap the sign," because he's got the meme. It says, "Don't make me tap the sign," and then it's got "the money is broken." So if anyone's moaning about prices, he just says, "Don't make me tap the sign."
But you could analyse that whole thing slightly differently. Property is a good example, because building houses used to be cheap. And houses didn't used to be worth much money. So you couldn't charge a huge amount for your labour. Now we have this situation where, well, most people's houses are worth like at least 500. If you're in a detached house, you're looking at at least £500,000 for a house, aren't you, on average, right? So building that house now is obviously can cost a lot more, unless you
have a forest.
Well, okay, yeah, you can do it for free yourself then, but you still got to build it.
Yeah,
you still got to get someone else to hold the other end of one of your massive beams that you've got over there.
You do, especially when you're 5'7".
But yeah, I agree that the spread between those types of jobs is definitely probably coming from an end. I mean, I'm just thinking about even my own profession. I was a photographer in Fleet Street, and I was on £250 a day. Wow. In 2000, and now they're on about, well, now my job doesn't exist anymore because I worked for a newspaper, right? But if you work for an agency, which is the same kind of thing, you're probably getting less than that now. But back then, I think my plumber was probably on about 70 to £100 a day, and he's now on 300. In London, probably 350. So yeah, it's, and I don't know about your average mortgage provider or insurance broker or whatever,
Well, they're all just jobs, to borrow from Jeff Booth, that fall into their marginal cost. And if you've got an AI that can pass the bar exam and it can pass the medical exam for MD, and what else have we got? It could pass an architect's exam. Then how can that not drop the price of those services? I'm not a complete Luddite. I don't think we're going to be losing slabs of white collar workers. I just think that more will be expected of them in their invoice, because everybody's going to use it themselves, and you've got to use it with the skill you've learned to make a better job of it for my money. But
presumably, though, AI will be replacing a lot of sort of manual jobs as well, though.
I think AI will have the same effect on white collar and blue collar, in the sense that more will be expected of an individual in their day, and things that it can do will make things easier. So a blue-collar guy might measure up a floor, and then those things might go into something that produces a render for him that it would take him a day to do, usually. It'd be the same guy that haven't destroyed the use case of a builder, but they can just do a little bit more in their own power. And I think that that's going to get cheaper to an extent that physical products are not going to get as cheap. So all the services and the intelligence and the non-tangible parts of the economy are actually going to keep getting cheaper, in keeping with the power of the microprocessor as delivered by increasing AIs. They're teasing the GPT-5 now already. So it will have that, in the digital space, it will have that voracious deflationary effect on everything. But meat space, if you like, will still have diesel prices at X, land prices at Y, people's base rate of pay at Z. And so that spread will be anchored better from physical space than from digital, which is why I like having a physical business. I was just going to say that what you're doing here, you're longing that idea right now here, aren't you? Timber's got from a broken side. I remember I haven't taken a single dollar of risk professionally, so don't mistake me for a trader. but you get to watch a lot of bets and you get to learn a little bit, like the ship's parrot gets to learn a lot about how a boat works, I suppose. But I just think timber as a product, if we go back to like maximum amounts of uncertainty and uncertain world, not knowing what's what, timber's got optionality. It's in a good economy, it installs into people's houses and follows the house prices up. And in a bad economy, it converts into wood fuel.
You can also store. It's a good store of value.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Michael Saylor, like, I can't send my electricity to Japan and I can't keep it for 1,000 years, and that is all true. But if you just looked at timber as a crappy form of money, but that it had monetary properties, fungibility, transportability, and all the rest of it, it's actually quite a nice thing to have a supply of, especially if we've got a problem in Bitcoin where we're all just sort of renting our physical spaces and going to the conferences and then going back to the fiat mines, as a lot of people say. And I think there's an opportunity to build some, like Bitcoin Park has been an early example of a Bitcoin located space that is membership driven and finite amount of space. We could do that with amenity land in the UK and Europe and in Prospera.
So can you elaborate then on your plan for what makes this project here any different from someone buying a bit of land and knocking out wood off their land? You know, what's the difference? How do you explain that to someone? Because it is very different and it is unique and it has a much larger idea behind it.
Yeah, I don't think it explains very well to most people, and
let me try at least then, and tell me where I'm getting it wrong. But what's important here is the physical network.
Yeah, I mean, if you were an MBA, you'd call it vertical alignment. So I've got a primary industry in the forest that produces logs, and there's a secondary industry that takes the round logs and makes them square, and that's sawmilling. And then there's a tertiary industry that takes those beams and makes houses out of them under contract, and that's construction. And then there's I don't know what tertiary is in for, but the fourth layer is property management and renting those out. And that's a vertical alignment. And where you have supply chains that are very fragile and global, there's an opportunity to open up something small that has vertical alignment. And so if you imagine you're on Google Maps looking at our site, the log that we cut on the site moves 300 meters up to the top of this crag and we mill with it. And then once it's milled, it goes down a mile away into a workshop and is worked, and another process is added to it. And then it goes to the customer, or it goes onto one of our own projects to build something for Bitcoiners as a facility. So the log doesn't travel very far. Another fiat supply chain log might get cut here. It might get sent 50 miles to Pontrilas, and then they might mill it into B&Q wood, and B&Q have to have their own payroll and their own. So there's a lot of efficiencies. Once you're kind of stuck in one place, you've got no choice but to put more processes on it. That you do get a lot of efficiency from that. And the cost is just the extra machinery to make sure you can do this legally in the right place at the right time and get a product that pays.
And where the importance, something else that distinguishes this project is that you definitely see it as part of a physical network of Bitcoin projects as well.
Yeah, it's just that, I don't know what, there's serendipity or something. There's a lot of talk about mesh Citadels and free cities, and it's always been rather academic, or where it has launched, and it's kind of been a sort of mixed failed effort. But no, the forestry concludes here on the land, and then this place opens up to amenity uses. And as a landowner, just a practical matter is, do you want to open this up to the public? Or can you get some income in from people that you know that are better than average visitors for various reasons? And that's really where the Bitcoin thing comes in. And other people are doing it. Plan B networks setting up these co-located cities and hubs, and with various facilities like warm weather surfing, and there's a cold weather one and you can go hiking. And I think these networks will end up trying to do the same thing and ultimately becoming open to each other, a little bit like Air Miles Star Alliance, you're kind of getting a Bitcoin location to stay in, and it's a little bit like an open club. And I think that's what it's going to lead up to. I want to have the land busy, but I want to have it busy in places I personally care about.
And presumably Nostr will be a part of that network, will it? Because that would make, I mean, at the moment you're saying, it's for Bitcoiners because we all know and trust Bitcoiners. And
well, you just know people. You know that those same smiling faces. That's an anecdotal way of sort of sorting out who you want to spend your time with and who you'd rather not. Nostr just maybe formalizes that and makes it more efficient to just see who you can manage the access control based on who someone knows. I know that there's people, I have a friend who I have never met before that I'd welcome on the site right now on virtue of who they knew. And Nostr just makes that, it's not happening yet, but it's very easy for me as a non-dev to see that it's only going to take another few months for someone to stitch that together, and someone can vouch for a guest in the way that you vouch if you were a club member in London. Someone else can come in and it's just, instead of IDs, and it's just an NPub. So we're going to play around with that here on terms of access control, and then take it further with the certifications and training done through Nostr, but that needs a physical location because it's adventure training. So this place is a great adventure training site. Once the forestry is dealt with, it will move back to an amenity use. And why shouldn't that be Bitcoiners? They come onto a private site and do something challenging.
Which kind of like is alluding to one of the most, I think, interesting things about Bitcoin, the kind of the social layer of Bitcoin, or whatever you want to call it, is that one of the purposes of this whole thing and this whole Bitcoin thing is for a new network to appear, which you opt into, and then you live in a parallel system until it basically sucks everyone in, or most people.
It doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you're on that network and you like what you're coming to visit and the people you meet, it doesn't need to have another extra person on it. I mean, it would scale. It's not something I have any appetite to do on my own, but I'd be happy with a handful of locations and having people use this for events and training and things that the land or the facilities can offer, and just do that within the Bitcoin network. It's already more than big enough.
It's interesting, actually. I never thought because one of the Free Cities ideas is essentially the same: a network of independent jurisdictions, which you can opt in and out of. Yeah. And I always assumed that these would be formed very much by design. Let's build this thing, and let's and people are thinking about it in a very simple way, but arguably, this particular version of this idea is it's much more of a ground up one, isn't it?
It's an MVP, as like the devs would say, like a minimum viable product. So if what you've just described is the fully fledged vision, this is the skateboard to get to your Ferrari. It's not running on a different legal system. It's running on the fiat rails to the maximum extent I can receive visitors safely. But it still serves the quality of life of Bitcoiners. I still underwrite their safety. I still provide them with facilities for a fee at some point. And that's good. That means that they don't have to go that 1x further to go on Airbnb to put money they've earned into the wrong part of the economy when they could put it into people that they actually quite like.
And what about the long-term future, though?
Why worry about it?
It was good, but as a thought experiment then, if you follow this into the future, one of the things I often think about in what all these little networks of people that are trying to create something new is that one day the two networks come up against each other. Yeah. And we know I don't know what you think about it, but I think fighting is not a good idea. They've kind of they've got us on that. You can't fight the system, really. Yeah, you can opt out of the system, but if you actually try and fight it, I think they're just tooled up and ready to fight, and they'll probably beat us.
No, I don't think that's the case. I don't have as hopeless. I've had that hopeless attitude to local authorities and things in the past, but actually over a long enough time, I do think that force of will is still what sets the difference between a project failing and succeeding. And they have a certain amount of will, and you have a certain amount of will, and there's an underlying problem that you're applying to tend to, and they just can only hold out so long on a basic fact, which here is the timber has to come out. If it doesn't come out, it falls over. So you can't. It's not like turning me down for an extension or a conservatory if I don't have it. If I don't have this, it's not me. that has the problem. It's everybody around the land. And they're really still wrestling with that, I think. And it's just a matter of playing for time. Oh, this timber has a right to come out and it will come out, but it's just that you have to really decide that that's the outcome you're going to get and then really not count the cost of it. You've just got to keeping a positive pressure on your applications and you will get them if you're asking for the right things. But it's a really hard, low effort thing every day.
Constant. Something I wanted to talk to you about, which is it's going to sound, there's no segue into it. I was hoping that a segue would appear.
You look for one and it
I was waiting, and I don't even really know. All I know is that when I've spoken to you in the past, off the record, we've bumped into each other a few different places. You're always going on about long vol and vol. And whenever you start talking about it,
your eyes glaze over.
No, the opposite. My eyes light up. But then because you seem to, it's like you know something I don't.
Yeah.
And whatever it is you're saying, I'd never really got to the bottom of it. I want you to explain it to me now. I want you to tell. Or just volatility, or love the volatility, or like how important volatility is, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I definitely got this volatility word from the finance background.
Sure.
It's the first time you really wrestled with it and had to know what it meant to other people. It's definitely a financial term, but it's got obviously an English broader term of just choppiness or change. Lots of good examples of definitions of vol. Were expectations, the gap between expectations and reality is quite a good one. Volatility in that sense. But it's definitely a financial term first. And what it really means is if you're long vol, you're long meaning that you buy and you own. So it means you're long, like I'm long Bitcoin, and short being the opposite. And short vol and long vol are just things that you can expose yourself in a market. It's where you're betting on the price changes being more volatile,
extreme,
than otherwise. And if you are short vol, you're making a bet that the price or the event that you're protecting yourself from is not going to happen. So you're saying that if it did happen, I would lose a lot of money because I have to pay to cover it. So anything in your life where you're short vol, it means that if there's an event that happens, you are materially worse off after it. You're kind of short vol in that sense. And the opposite of that is if you're long vol. And that is a portfolio manager's simple rules of the road. But it's also not a bad thing to apply to your life more generally. And volatility, I think, is just something that has been captured by finance and used in finance for a very arcane and specific niche to describe things. But their mathematics in vol for markets could just as easily and should be applied to your outlook in life. And I do. And it's just funny that I'd done that job and then
Is this long vol? Then?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Why? Explain to me why.
Because if you are long vol, or you have a trade, or you have something, we're all short vol, because we all die. So I can't say you're long vol because, ultimately, there's no hedge against us. This all stopping. So under that miserable.
What about religion?
Well, religion, yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's a hedge against maybe do the right thing, live
hope's
forever
the fool's
eternally.
Ally. No, hope's the fool's ally. Vol is insurance. I mean, if you were to make it into something that everybody understands, volatility is insurance. Why is that? Volatility, if you're long vol, you tend to give up something right now as a cost, an upfront cost, and it tends to protect you from a future cost that's very high. So a car insurance product, if you're the buyer of the car insurance product, you're long vol. You've just paid £100 and you've insured yourself against a $200,000 crash. So you've paid 100, and if that thing happens, you get a big payout that protects you from something that you've got risk in your life. But in the markets, you don't need to have the risk to protect to expose yourself to the volatility. Some hedge funds just say it's going to be more volatile in the future. That's our view. And we will just buy broad amounts of types of insurance to anticipate in that period of time we own it that it's going to get more choppy and we make money. So long volatility is tied again to Nassim Taleb's work as well. So this idea, have you heard of anti-fragility?
Yes.
So where you're resistant means that you can sustain pressure and not get damaged. And if you're fragile, you have pressure and you are damaged. Anti-fragile is you receive pressure and you're stronger as a result of the pressure. And that, again, is a link to long volatility because you're better after something that's an outside pressure be it a price swing or something in the economy, if it dislocates and you benefit from it to the degree that you did, and why is to the degree that you're long vol to that event.
I think
Bitcoin is long vol.
You described something in your business here that fitted that earlier to me before we were speaking about the fact that you used to mill something over there. Oh, no, yeah, that's right. No, you used to mill something here, which involved a worker driving here. That worker then lost their driving license.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's a good example. So
yeah, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. That's exactly right. So the other link to volatility is interesting is Stoicism. So in that sense, this thing we'll talk now about, this little story, it ticks both boxes, but it's called Citadel timber. So when we're talking about anti-fragility, those old round forts, they were designed that if they were hit by a log on the outside, it would actually strengthen the tower. The pressure in that round structure would actually be spread around the fort, and it would tighten the bricks up. It's a stronger fort for the hit.
That is true.
That
makes sense. Is that for real?
That's right. And it's also, Citadel is obviously a Bitcoin thing now, but it's far longer than it's been a Bitcoin thing. It's been a Stoic principle in which that last inch of your character is in a citadel. No one can take that off you, torture or misery or anything. You've still got ultimate decision on how you decide to react to anything that happens in your life, and it's a Stoic principle. But going back to the attacks on the business, I don't mean like I'm a victim. I mean, I look at attacks and threats to the business as the to-do lists as to what we do next to address the next most risky thing that can threaten my project. And one of them was that we'd gone into timber framing and got a chap who'd really proven himself on the site many times over. And we got him up to Scotland to do a timber framing course. So it's an element of investment. And then we got back and he got caught up in stopped by the cops and lost his license. He lives too far away to get to the site. And so a Stoic would say, well, that's all part of doing this as a business and it's not separate. And had that happened separately, I'd be happy now. It's not. It's that's part of whatever this is. And it proves it's a successful attack because it showed me that having too many eggs in the basket of one person, even if they're really a person I love and completely trust, sometimes that isn't why it fails. It fails because he can't physically get here. If he'd have broke his leg, it would have been the same problem. And so the answer isn't to just sit in that and be sad. It's not to be resistant to it and just bugger on. It's to change the plan so that there's a big benefit from that thing that got you. How do you completely turn it inside out and turn it into a harder part of the project instead of a weaker part of the project? And so we've invested in some more robotic machinery. And we've brought a couple of lads in that go across different jobs. And so we don't have that key man in that part of it anymore. And then the added advantages or the things that you might make that decision just for that, but you get loads of advantages once you've addressed a problem. So that mill, that CNC machine, it addresses a problem of staff consistency. But it also does 10 other jobs. And the opportunities multiply as you seize them, as you go along. And so now I can bring on someone a bit more technical, or we can get into a different product. And that's how the business has grown. It's not been, I want to go after that market. It's been, right, wake up. What, in your own view, is your gut feeling about what's the biggest thing in this project that is at risk? And that's the thing you work on. Which is negative visualization. Yeah, it is, but it's negative visualization as a Stoic thing as well, where you imagine horrible things, and then when you end that thought, you actually feel good about what you're sat in because you've thought of all the worst things that could have happened. And look at us in the sun, happy, and it's that cold plunge emotionally. You come back out of it and you're refreshed, and that's what I do in the morning. I get up and I worry about my business, and everything that's on the top of my mind, and I wake up is worthy of merit, and it just goes down on paper, and then it gets triaged into whatever. If I come back to it in an hour and it's legitimate, I need to address that, it'll go into the operation schedules as something I've mitigated. I don't know what it would be. It's
a system of making yourself more self-sovereign as well, in a way.
Yeah, it is. It's a Stoic. It's just a Stoic thing to break the writer's block of what to do next if you had nothing to start with. Everybody wakes up and has a fear. Everybody wakes up and has something that's on their mind. And it's a lot of the time for people, it's about separating that or making it less real or hiding it or ignoring it and getting on with whatever else. But it's actually a very good signpost through what you should really be concentrating on. And I've just taken the Stoic stuff I read in my 20s and put it down and thought, oh, that was very pithy and clever, and actually applied it here and noticed that, like everything applied is different than just known about and talked about. And it's actually working as an idea. It's a lovely feeling.
You learned any other new and profound lessons from this particular?
Yeah, I've learned. I'm on my 5th level of self-awareness. Like,
what are the main ones?
That you really can't underestimate how insane you can look to someone else. Like, you go, oh, okay, maybe I don't look or sound like or make the same noises as someone else. That's one revelation. So that's like in your 20s, and then it's like,
wait a minute,
it keeps going and going.
I like, because I often feel that if I could jump into someone else's skin and look through their eyes,
that's all I try and do.
Or the other way around, if someone could jump and look at my eyes, they'd be amazed at what my mind's thinking about. Yeah, because it's probably, I just think everyone's thinking about that, but they're not. No. It's like error correction. We're constantly. Way
more different than we think, than the other person. Our thoughts, our feelings, how we actually physically feel, I think is just increasingly different. And I know exactly what I'm doing. I have a non-zero amount of confidence in it, and I'll do it. But where the problem is that it's not just enough to just pay people and say, trust me. Actually getting the best out of people, and remember there's lots of different backgrounds, lots of different personalities, is to get something that, once they're covered on their money, which is their downside, is to say, well, this is the reason to work hard at it. And this is so abstract and so long term that it's really hard for people to come on and really see the result of their work inside of a week or a day. And it's taken years of just me saying, don't worry, lads, this is coming on. And it's abstract. Like, you're trying to get your arms around it in one visit. You imagine if you're working up here and you're not a Bitcoiner and you're not nothing. You're used to dropping 300 trees a day, and there's a guy telling you you only need to drop 5 or 10 for the same money, and he's just trying to work you out. He's never let you down, but there's a bit of this that doesn't make sense, and that motivational part and that credibility part's taken years.
All right, that's one thing you've learned. What else?
One thing, just lots of practical stuff around land management. But I don't know, maybe big stuff is just to go back to what we already knew on the books we read when we were teenagers, and just go back word by word and take them a little bit more seriously. The words matter, and the key principles on stuff are really important, and I'd glossed over them and counted them as like fortune cookie wisdom. And actually, if you pay a little bit more time to some of the really big stuff, you can use it. It's very useful on practical problems, and I've used lots of old ideas here to just sort of overcome or just motivate myself to get through something that was not for softening up. So yeah, I just think the basics done well. And that plus time, and you just got to absolutely commit to get to the end of it, and it has come up good.
But what is the end? What is the end of it? Like,
what is the end? I mean, we're past a point with it where I feel like I'm still trading out of a loss. I think it's at the point where it's kind of won in that sense, is that it's taken a lot of work, and I'm out of the sort of worst of the negative outcomes from here. But now, like, having worked for all that, it's quite nice to see there's a suite of upside now, and some discretion and some opportunities at a time when the Bitcoiners are talking about being more physical space, needing things more around the software. And I'm in an interesting place. It's like a kind of factory model in a way, sort of decentralized, and we can point that gun of product at anybody, and it's stuff we need. It's stuff we need. We can't hedge where we live and what we eat with Bitcoin. We've got to do that with all this stuff you're around.
I think I wouldn't say I'm more. Yeah, no, I do understand what's going on here. I do understand. It's just
because can you take over? I'm knackered.
But the thing is, I want other people to understand. Because I think, and it is really relevant to the whole, and many of the ideas behind free cities, because they're along the same lines. And I mean, look, the free cities thing is a bit of a spectrum, and you get a lot of dreamers,
yeah,
and I don't really gel with the dreamer side of it.
The military guys call them Walter Mitties. Have you heard that phrase?
No.
Walter Mitty is like a character in a movie, and he's got lots of dreams, and he imagines himself like jumping out of a fighter jet, and he wakes up and he's on the bus. He's like a dreamer.
Right.
So Walter Mitty is someone who thinks they've been there and done it.
Right.
But they've actually just dreamt about it.
And there is a fair amount of that.
There is.
I mean, the reason I like Prospera, obviously, is because they're actually building things. They're actually making stuff. But there are quite a few dreamers within Prospera, actually.
Yeah, that attracts, like, you can imagine the people it would attract. It's just not so much about that. It's about having the marketing message right, so that the wrong people don't come and the wrong people don't not come.
Yeah, but everyone will come, you know. But what underlies the kind of what on a surface level you could just see as a simple kind of like forestry project. Mm-hmm. What underlies it is very similar to what's going on in the Free Cities movement, I think, and it comes down to the idea that the best way to evolve out of this quagmire that most people find themselves in is to create something of value, and then basically attract people to interact with it, and then a network appears which is like superimposed over the old network.
Well, you have to create something of value, but what the Free Cities, I think the biggest challenge they face is that it's not enough to create something of value, it's then to protect it from being destroyed or partly stolen. And, you know, that's the point. Like, I can create something of value here and pay a lot of tax to produce it here. And I think the Free Cities projects that are grappling with what's unsaid, perhaps, is that anywhere that's in reach of a bully, that there isn't another bully to bully them, is your taxman. And if you can create something of value and it's outside of the reach of somebody to effectively threaten the destruction of it, give me 5% of what you've just made value, or I'll just stamp it into atoms. And that channel is what people in entrepreneurs work to. And where the successful market breakthroughs are where a product just is built so quickly or just is so ubiquitous that it can't be attacked. And Bitcoin in that sense can't be hurt. And that's why it broke through in monetary technology in ways that other things couldn't, because they were within reach of being attacked. David Chome's $1980 Chomian Mint was attacked because it was attached to nerve endings that were attached to a SWIFT account at a bank. And Nostr and Bitcoin aren't. So it's the Free Cities are trying to create things of value, yes, but the second part of the mission, in my opinion, is to be able to do it with total ubiquity from people who can coerce you to not create it, or they want half of it.
Which is probably, because we all live on the same planet, impossible.
Well, it's this thing about that you've heard, like the elephant and the whale. So they're both animals that are dominant in their domains, and the elephant rules the land and can't swim. Or I know they can, but they don't dominate the sea. And the whale dominates the ocean. And I think when it comes to violence, I don't think Bitcoin is really talk enough about how the fact we are not Bitcoins, and that we are physical and we are subject to the analog Newtonian rules of I can kick you up and take your stuff and go. And that won't be Bitcoin anymore because of what's been achieved in the digital space. So Bitcoin rules in the digital kingdom. No one can crack a Bitcoin wallet, so it's the king. But where we live, it doesn't matter. Anything outside of Bitcoin we need to create, it can be destroyed by somebody. And if they feel like they can do that sustainably, they're the people who will tax you. So what does that really mean? It just means that we need to build things in places that are very, very hard or impossible to steal. And Nostr is a good example of that. It's very hard for anybody to coerce that to the point that it would serve somebody else's aims, as hard as it would be to do that with the Bitcoin network at this point.
But what about physical networks, though?
Well, we all just have to accept that, you know, digital is digital and physical is physical, and there's a different channel of activity. The Bitcoin hasn't. It's left an arena of violence, but it didn't take us with it, and we're still here. We're a day after a trial for samurai who wanted to break some auditability of the traceability of Bitcoin, and they're being tried under money transmitter laws, and they've been in prison for 3 months at least, maybe 6, and they're still talking about when the trial date is. So we still live in an analog world. We can still be grabbed and still be put in a box or coerced or made to wear a mask. And that's a much harder challenge. It's great that we can move our wealth into an abstract place that no one can steal it, but that we don't go with it.
So what's your best solution to that then? Because I've never... I mean, in the old days, the solution to that problem was to find a new frontier. Yeah, that's kind of what people did. And that's
west. Go west
or wherever.
Yeah,
my attitude on a personal level is that, you know, like even if I'm living somewhere and I end up with nightmare neighbours, my instinct is not to try and change those neighbours. It's to see whether I can move to a better place. That would be my instinct. Find a new frontier, kind of thing. And historically, that's what people have done. Found new frontiers. But we've run out of frontiers really, other than obviously space or the sea, you know, like, and there are seasteading projects happening, and there's obviously talk of going out into space.
But they don't get out of the channel of violence, and neither does space. I mean, anywhere someone can send a rocket can send a request for you to send 10% of your Bitcoin down here, otherwise we're going to send a rocket up to you. It's like the oldest thing in history is to, you know, there's always been a channel of human activity, and at the bottom of it is the threat to destroy it, and at the top of it is to create something that can't be destroyed. And below that is there's been this active trade of bullies shaking value out of people who make stuff. And when they've been too aggressive, there's been revolutions. And when they've been too passive, we've had government grow. But it's always in this channel. If you create something that can't be attacked, then that survives. That's Bitcoin and other examples. And then if you do something that's within reach of a bully, you've made it for them to the extent they ask for a piece of it. And that's just how it is. We haven't made ourselves any physically safer with Bitcoin. Clearly, because they keep swatting people who keep adding to the network and doing some of its most important functions. They're in a prison. They've not even been tried yet.
So are you saying it's an eternal battle, and the best you can do is know which side you're on?
Yeah, it's to just sort of put to bed this idea that we're all going to make it and there's never going to be any pain, or someone isn't going to get roll a one and get really badly, maybe their life destroyed, just doing what everyone else is trying to do. There's a good phrase from years ago I heard, the mice will win, but the cats will be well fed. And I think that's a good example. I think the cats are pretty well fed now. And yeah, first, the most important thing is to just be serious and adult about this. And that Bitcoin is political, and the values behind it are political. And that ultimately you show them values and you expose yourself to a certain amount of pressure. I think we've all felt that. And that's a legitimate form of pressure. People can come and ruin your life. And it doesn't matter whether you're into Bitcoin or not. You know, it doesn't matter. You're still going to be ruined.
Isn't part of the Bitcoin thesis that you can walk away with your Bitcoin?
It's easier. It's not. It's of course it's completely easier to do that. But you're walking somewhere, so that's on somebody's land or through somebody's jurisdiction. And you know, if we look at the sovereign individual book thesis, we're not just going to get. There's always a trade-off. We might get higher prices in Bitcoin, but that might come at the expense of something in fiat world that we use that we now can no longer rely on. When Bitcoin moves into the money in a scenario, the fiat services that it's replacing presumably have moved out. That could be an increasingly failed NHS, or the infrastructure inside of trains and buses could just go to zero, or just go intermittent, or lighting, or the water, or the power, anything could be intermittent. And having an amount of Bitcoin or not is not going to change that. You think not enough people prepping then? Well, I'm not a prepper. I wouldn't say I'm a prepper, but to tell you the truth, in preparing. Then. Well, yeah, preparation is good. You just got to understand that if you have a mentality where you need to prepare for everything, you're going to spend more time protecting yourself from things that don't happen than just living your life. But you can't be feckless and not take account of things that might hurt you in the future. And the sweet spot is where you get that cheap, long vol upside. So you brush your teeth because it's not because you love it. It's because you might love it. Do you like brushing your teeth? I do. No, I actually do. I'm a bit weird. But that's an insurance policy against the filling. If you're fit and you go to the gym, you're putting in pain and sweat every day or every other day. So that one time you need to be fit, need to be strong, need to be able to run somewhere in an emergency, you're positively exposed to a future problem. And all these other little ways you can be long vol. It means that to whatever degree the world's uncertain, you can set your life up that it can work in a number of different things, and you don't need to be an expert about the future to know that some things just work great in any situation. firewood, water, first aid training. You have some fun doing it. You don't spend your whole life worrying about it, and that's the stuff I work on doing. And no part of the business, no person or inventory item has got one use. They've all got four. They have a primary use, an alternate use, a contingency use, and an emergency use. And that's people have 4 jobs, and the machinery can do 4 different things. So that if something happened where that particular product didn't sell, or that guy didn't turn up, or we lost that piece of machinery on that day, we can still kick out a resilient output across. So if we had a terrible day in the afternoon, we'd bring all the lads in from felling, and we could do some firewood splitting in the clear, and we just keep going on. So it's that resilience to the plan changing, not to be like, oh, the plan keeps changing, it's so uncertain out there, oh, woe is me, this isn't a good thing for entrepreneurs. It's like, no, the difficulty adjustment just went up. You've got to have a smarter approach and a humble approach, because the other good thing about this is you say, what's going on in the next 12 months? I just say, I don't care. Worked hard enough to say that 80-90% of the things that will happen in the next 12 months I'll either be protected from or maybe do slightly well from. And that's enough. It's cool, isn't it?
It is.
There's a guy called Chris Cole who runs a fund. He's not a Bitcoiner. And he's a typical volatility, but from the financial side. And some of his papers are some of the most original works of financial literature I've ever read. And he has these fantastic papers about volatility. And his fund, all it does is he thinks that some options that get offered in the market are like insurance policies. And sometimes, for reasons of whatever, inefficiency, they come up really cheap. He can buy insurance and the dollar price of insurance might be 0. The event it covers might not be very likely, but if you can just buy as many zeros as you can, and if that happens, it happens, you make money. 0's a big number. So that guy just buys a little bit of stock, and then he goes and buys loads and loads of cheap options on things that the whole market thinks is never going to happen. And so for most of the time, his fund just kind of wipes its feet. But then when that snap happens, he doesn't care if it's an Icelandic volcano or COVID. You don't need to be so clever as to guess what events will happen, and then even more clever would be to guess what events those events would have as an effect on a price of a market. Good luck. You get wrecked sometimes. Even if you knew what was happening in advance, you could still trade it and lose money, even if you knew the result of something.
Isn't it? Would you say that, like, when I think of volatility, I think your average person would say is a bad thing. They're all looking for a simple life with no volatility, with predictability.
And equally, if you talk about Stoicism and negative visualization and remember that you die and the obstacle is the way, that's a turn off for people in the exact same part of the brain, I think.
So there's the whole thing a scam? Is this whole like life should be nice and
that's
simple?
A scam. Absolutely, that's a scam. Absolutely, that's a scam, in my opinion.
It's a story we tell ourselves because we just, I don't know, we intrinsically don't, people want to be, I think we're driven to create a world that isn't volatile. That's fair to say, isn't it? Because volatility causes you to use energy, right?
Yeah, I think it's
I think we're trying to preserve energy, aren't we? If we can sit on the couch all day and be fat, that's a kind of evolutionary urge to stop.
I think that obviously it's a big subject now. But no, I don't think we're evolutionary adapted to be idle. I think that that's counter-evolutionary.
Why is it happening then?
Because we're living in a situation in which Darwinian effects aren't the only things that we have to adapt to now. That's why.
Like what?
Well, in a typical evolutionary biome, then you wouldn't have as much availability of sugar as we do. And so that part of that system is misweighted with us, but our part of our brain that wants to eat loads of honey is still there.
So we're not driven to climb trees for honey anymore. Hence, there's no volatility.
We're still driven to climb them, but we don't have to climb them. We just have to stagger to the second aisle of the supermarket and like nudge it into the bag and pay very little for it, and you can gorge on whatever you want. The Stoic stuff and the long vol stuff is about resisting that inertia. It's about not being comfortable. It's not about being a complete masochist and just slapping your back with birch twigs. It's not that at all. It's saying there's a climbing phrase called feeding the rat, and it's this thing that there's an animal inside. It needs to be challenged. It needs to have something where it's all on the line. You're doing something that you're not sure you can achieve, but you're not so overwhelmed that you think you can't do it. And there's a challenge at play. If you're climbing, it's the top of the crag. If you're here, it might be the first felling license we get done. And there's always something that in your head you're really not sure you're going to get to, and you've got to risk failing. But that even if you've tried and failed or won, you'd feel good after it. And you've got to push yourself. I've never been happy when I've been quiet. Never. It's horrible.
I very much have I do tend towards having low volatility in my life, though. Mm-hmm. And I do enjoy it. Because I'm going through a phase now where in my life where I realise that I need to add some risk back into my life.
Yes,
in order.
Now we're talking.
Well, no, but I mean it.
I mean it.
Because, but not in that sense. I'm not like, yes, I'm actually genuinely nervous.
But I know what you're saying. You're saying no risk is risky. Like, to have nothing on the table it's an abdication of the time I've got on Earth. I've got to have a challenge. You've got to have accountability in something that you're doing. If you're relieved of money pressure and everything's running itself, that's a bad time, mental health, for a guy. If you've got nothing that gets you up and there's no reason for you to be on Earth and everything's met, that's a very dangerous thing. I think you really need to have a winnable war of some kind in your life. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody, but you have to be attending to something and be accountable. You've got to say, I want to do this, and I will do it, and then do it.
I agree with that, but I also have children and a family, right? Which is that. Like my comfortable place, which you have this kind of like, I suppose you'd call it your comfort zone for me, is as long as my kids are getting a good life and feeling good and getting to experience things and getting opportunities. And
well, you can be incredibly discomfort. You can be in a lot of discomfort and still achieve that.
Right, but it doesn't feel good. This is the thing. Yeah, I agree with that. But this is the point I'm realizing I'm at in my life, where I need to feel discomfort in order to basically reach. Unfortunately, you're not going to like this. Reach another level of comfort.
No, I'm with you on that. I'd agree with that.
So, okay, right. So the comfort thing is not an absolute no-no.
It's not to be avoided. It's just not to be surrounded by it. You must have something that you are not sure you're going to win on.
You reckon?
All
times?
Already. At all times. Well, no. I mean, obviously, if you've just come and if you just, like, if I get to the end of this, I'm having a bloody holiday. I mean, don't get me wrong. If someone jumps out of the hotel room and says, "Oh, what have you got on at the moment? What's your war, Ben?" Like, I'd be like, "Well, I'm having a rest." Like, it's not about that. I'm just saying that and I know there's a point past which you go to the gym a little bit less and you maintain your fitness. You go a little bit less again, you're losing it. And you're borrowing from something, and you know it in your gut, and you don't like it, and you want to be just whatever your thing is that annoys you that you don't do, or you don't have the discipline to do it, a little bit of it, and you'd feel so much better.
I must admit, a lot of it comes down to discipline, which is something that I've known about for a long time, but is becoming more and more important in my life. Discipline in very small ways, in very simple little, if you
points
don't
of principle, like you feel like I'll do that because I know if I don't do it, I'm going to make a point to do it.
You have to do it. You have to do it right now.
Yeah.
And my mind has got so good at not being disciplined, at just saying, I don't need to do that, in a really subtle way, to the point where you have to force yourself. As soon as you think, oh, I should do that.
That's it.
You have to do it right now.
That's it.
Or never.
That's the first ember on the floor of a fire that I will not entertain having in my life ever again. If I start to do that shit, that's 2 months, 3 months away from being idle. I won't do it.
You're right.
If I get that feeling now, I'm so scared of just procrastinating my time at this point. I've done it in the past, and the regret you have after you go back onto a productive line about how much time you wasted is just too much. I'm busy now until I'm dead. I'm not in a bad way. I love that. I'll have rests and I'll eat when I'm hungry and sleep when I'm tired. But what I mean is, I'll never sit and loll around and wonder what it's all about. There'll always now be something practical I can get in and have a fight with. And that's a brilliant feeling. I don't know why we've gone to a comfort culture. I couldn't tell you.
There's a phenomenal book.
It hasn't helped in safety rates, because I used to be a bit of a Dudley do-good in the Air Cadets, and we used to do all sorts of stuff there, what wouldn't be considered safe now probably. And all the injury rates in those places, because they're publicly available, they've all gone up. The kids aren't any safer by not doing physical stuff. They're more unsafe because they're completely cack-handed and never understood the basics of just staying out the way of something dangerous. You forget, I had a really great rock and roll kid, upbringing, archery, and I flew a plane solo before I was allowed to drive and all this stuff, and the kids don't get it now.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it is I had the same childhood. Out of the house all day, no one knew where I was. Sometimes I rode my bike 20 miles, and things like that, just looking for new places. And
I have a big video game on it.
But I have children
GTA.
now, right?
Yeah.
And I struggle with letting them do those things. What's changed in me? I understand the principles. I had all that freedom. I don't think the world's a worse place. I don't think it's more dangerous necessarily.
I just think we've got a better view on what was horrible all the way along. We're just more efficient at reporting horribleness. And everything else in the proportions have broadly stayed the same, I think, in terms of how people behave and stuff. But no, going back to your kids and stuff, I don't have kids. I plan to at some point. I want to have a family. And I go really wildly between, would you not just want to give them all the good and bad of your own childhood, because that means you get to where you're going, or do you want to change it? And do you want to indemnify them in some way against downside, or give them an extra thing you didn't have? And I've seen the examples of that go well. I've seen them go badly. And I am not decided. I think I'm going to give them a really bad time, making things really hard for them.
Well, a lot of billionaires do that.
I don't want to be their friend.
Really?
I've not got kids. I've not got any immediate plans, but I've sort of already know I'm not going to be the way baby boomers are with their grandkids and children. Sorry, I'm going to there's an element of adversarialness. I'd rather have my kid have than just a buddy, because I think I can do better than a buddy.
You might find that you wear a few hats then, because there's a time to be adversarial, I think, and a time to be. I actually do think you are their friend. You are.
I would be, in the sense that you're the hug of last resort. There is nothing that a direct family member to me, no matter what they do, they get a phone call. I pick them up from wherever they are. They'd get covered, and that's the sense I'd underwrite it. But not in the sense of you get this, you get that. You only had to work half as hard as someone else to earn that. No, you work twice as hard for that.
What about if you had a lot of resources at your fingertips when you had children?
Just hire them for what they're good for. If you're going to be completely harsh and Hank Rearden about it, I think the people I know a kid in school who his father made hundreds of millions of pounds up in Formby from mobile phones when they came out, and the way he brought his children through the business was actually a quite interesting way of doing it. I think the Trump family, I don't know much about that far away in politics, but they look pretty well adjusted, and I don't know. I'm not building a family to match that sort of stuff, but I'm just mean that there's a lot of pitfalls, I think, with what you show and what you give your kids, and it's all mixed in with how much you love them, and there's a cruel to be kind truth, but there's also a practical I don't need to be the monster in someone's life to make their life better. And I don't know, I just appreciate having a stern male disciplinarian. I think it's I took such an amount away from that when I was a kid. And it doesn't surprise me that people who lack that have problems later. Certainly.
I mean, if it's any consolation, the way I run our family from my side is the buck stops with me. I'm the rock and the foundation of my kids' lives, like you said.
Yeah.
If the phone rings and it's them, I pick it up.
Yeah.
But I have certain beliefs. One of them is respect your elders.
Absolutely right.
And that goes without saying. And if any sign of disrespect appears, it gets hammered down very hard.
Yeah.
In a quite brutal way.
And someone might say, Tim, why are you breaking eggs in your family? Why are you being mean when you could have just done that a different way? And they don't understand that when you go out into the world, if you're polite, I went out, I was so well raised, middle class family. And we didn't have lots of money. We just had enough to live a normal UK upbringing, and it was fantastic. They gave their entire lives to me. And all I went out with was good manners, be on time. If someone's older than you, you don't have to argue the point. You can just say, okay, and they're older. And that got me through everything. If everyone just nailed that.
I think,
I love that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, strong...
The Bitcoiner kids are amazing.
Yeah, they
all tip up to the conferences like Prince's gang. I've just gone X-Man. And, sort of bumped into them when Dan was on the scene. So teenagers, and they're getting into young adults now. They're on panels. Just seen one in Prague. They're bloody brilliant. Public speaking with adults, not arrogant, not silly kids that distracted. They're just adults. They're just absolute monsters. You don't believe what that does if you're trying to get jobs and trying to get opportunities or friends. If you're that so well balanced when you're that age and you haven't got your own problems to fight out of, good God, I wouldn't bet against them. Nathan's kids, again, another example. Weeksy's kids, all these UK Bitcoiners, these families are just, compared to some of my extended families, I mean, it's just like they're growing different types of people.
But the weird thing is, like, most kids were like that when I was young.
That's what I mean, and that's why they're actually bloody good company. It's like, God, I haven't felt like this since I was bloody running off to buy Space Invaders from the post office for 5p. They're just bloody good fun. All the bloody boring dads, TikTok next block, they're all boring. I go, like, Nathan's kid, Sam's 12 years old, he's going to do the website for the Citadel business because he's good enough. Yeah. And he's a great laugh. He's a laugh.
Yeah.
They're great lads, and I just think that whatever they're doing, I'm going to be taking a lot of advice.
Well, a lot of it I think is to do with allowing your children to mix with different age groups. I think because a lot of those are homeschooled, and the problem with school is it puts you in this room full of people exactly the same age as you.
The teachers go like children. If you've got any teachers in your social life, they talk to you like you need to put your hand up for a wee. You're like, it could be like, Hannah, darling, like, you're not in work now. You're right, everybody over here. She's like, oh, no, you've become a child. You're child brain. But these guys are the opposite. They're adults. But I've seen that go the wrong way. I've got a cousin who sort of grew up with men. He just got dragged around the golf clubs with the men. And he didn't work. But that's not the same as what I've seen out of, say, particularly Prince's kids. I don't mean to single them out. But whatever's going on, it's the right mix. They're still children. And in the best possible sense, but they're also so well adjusted and mature. Yeah. And they've got no hang-ups. They'll have little things, self-confidences, but there's no major things. They're just so ready to go into whatever they're going to do.
Well, look, my theory is not very unique, but from, being a dad for more than a decade now, is the most important thing that you can give your children is a family unit, number one. And secondly, is to remind them as many times a day as you can that this family is the most important thing to you and the buck stops here.
Absolutely.
And the people that you can rely on are here. So don't fight with your brother or sister because at the end of the day, they're the only people you can really trust on. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah,
no,
I know exactly.
I mean it in the real sense of it, which we all know as we grow up, that there are people that you can count on, and
when
they
you need
are
them.
your immediate family. And it may be your mates as well, but your mates have immediate family as well. And
it's about responsibilities. Like if you've got a family, inside that family, if I was to have one, I'd treat it as like communism. Everybody's the same in a family unit. I'm an anarchist, but in a family unit, my blood, your blood. In a direct family unit, and I get the sense that's how you feel about your guys. It just gives them an enormous amount of confidence. All the problems in the world are diluted by that certainty at any one time, and not everybody has that, and that can be enough. It's only like going out to the crag here. How would you feel? How would you climb differently if you had a rope coming from the top on an anchor, or if you were just on the wall on your own? If you had no family and your friends were good time friends who would always owe you a $5 or probably a 20 now. You wouldn't climb the wall differently. If you're a child who's got confidence that if you fall, you're not going to be judged or that it's held over your head and your intent will always be understood, they're going to go up that wall in a very different way than someone who constantly has to question if they're doing the right thing. And I want to do that with a family at some point in the future. And I do that with my friends to the degree I can. But yeah.
Well, I mean, in my experience, children work best within a very secure set of boundaries, basically set by normally the father figure, or they enforce the boundaries. The boundaries might be a joint effort, but kids love being in boundaries because, number one, it gives them something to push against, which is really important. Yeah. And as a proficient sort of parent, you can notice that, and you can see the ones where you're strict about it. And our plan has always been, and is still, to slowly but surely, as they get older, let those boundaries fall away until there's one day where there's no boundaries and they're their own people.
That interim period's the risky one because they're teenagers, so they're getting their own sense of identity. They know better than dad. Dad's an idiot. All dad did was put a house and a family of 3 together. What a wally. I'll show him, and at 15, he will go and make an absolute whopper of a mistake. And the first place they'll go back to is dad. And it's that first thing is like, right now, we're taking the Nerf foam off the corners of the world for you. Phone, bank account. You'll go out, and with that rope, you'll slightly hang yourself, and we can bring you back and get you off that, and you take it forward, and you'll have more and more confidence in when you can bend a boundary or break it, and you become more and more sovereign in that sense. You are handing that sovereignty off, the responsibility of decision to them. And that's why seeing like 3-4 generational families is just such an inspiration in a time when we can't beat the replacement rate. I love those family photos where there's 30 grandkids, and it's like, that is whatever worked in that model. Is there's so much love in those families, and I've got them in mine, but it's not got a very big family. And that's on the list. But I'm a guy, so I've got the privilege of waiting a little bit longer. I came out a little bit wonky, so I've got to go and learn a few more lessons than the average guy. But I'll be putting, when I've learned my lessons, and I'm not a total idiot.
I would posit you've learned a lot of lessons.
I feel old.
Well, you've done a lot of things, haven't you? A lot of different things, let's say.
Yeah, but they're just subjects. They're not. They all have governing principles that sort of rhyme with me, like finance. Military to finance to dive into this. It's all basically the same rules. So they make decisions in the same way. They just all have their own nomenclature and their own priests, and they all pretend it's a hidden subject. It's actually really straightforward stuff that if you do the basics in well, you can't get hurt. And if you get good, you can get some good experiences out of it. And that's true of everything, except maybe forestry. If you stick to the rules in forestry, you still get killed. No matter what you do. But anything else, like diving or capital allocation, just don't be a wally. Like, there's basic rules. You've got to have the discipline to stick to them.
Do you think you had a Bitcoin ethos before you discovered Bitcoin?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it wasn't anything new. It was just
It was new in the sense that what was just a dystopia that I was learning into. It's like, oh, it's a farm, and it's all bolted up. And you basically have to run across this hot frying pan and earn more and pay for everybody else. And it's bloody horrible. And it's basically diluting the nutrition of your economic potential with paper. And then it goes into the places that you want it to go least. And it's just so horrible and miserable. And I didn't realize money was such a scam. And I was black. Quit my job right at the peak of a career. And just walked. Just couldn't get out of bed. Started making mistakes on the trades. Just couldn't. That's where I'm saying, going back to motivation, it's like, you don't need motivation. You need to have a very clear understanding about your identity, and only take on work that identity is loyal to. Because there's days up here, there's no motivation in the world that get you up here on a bad day.
Really?
Oh my God.
I like places like this. I've hung out in places like this most of my life.
I love it. But what I'm saying is, this thing about like, oh, just like Mr. Motivator, just get yourself in, or put the Rocky music on. That's anaerobic. That you can only call on that, and you can't rely on it on a project this long or anything else that takes too long. You'll quit. And the reason you don't is because you've set off and you know exactly who you are, what you do, and what you're trying to test. And then whatever comes is crap. But you just do it. You can just do it. And the motivation is often not here. It's just the absolute whatever's after that bit where you can feel good or bad. There's just this concrete crawler gear that I just never leave here.
You've got
it's too good to not be loyal to as an idea. If we get to the end of all of this, what I'm hoping to do, it's just too much. There's no other opportunities like this in the world for me. It's right on.
Describe the end then, as you called it. Is that more expansive than this? Does that include networks around the world of people interacting?
Yeah, it does. I think it proves a model that other people are proving better at the moment in different ways. So the Plan B network, there's other people doing this where it's like, well, let's have a piece of multi-use land. What's happened in primary industries like farming and mining and all these places where stuff just basically comes out the ground is that for the longest time, we've not really had any access to them. And they've always paid as a single function enough to pay the tax and pay the payroll. And then Bitcoiners are going back to old practices like permaculture. For me, it would be silviculture or food forestry. And the beef initiatives and all of these things. They're trying to get back to a very low time preference way to do business. But the farms and the activities and the buy-in that costs creates a budgeting problem for landowners. Your beef operation, if that's all you did on the land, if everything went well, would make a typical fiat 10%, 20% margin. And some of these guys want to grow the root systems. So that means lower output of beef, less income. And the way that I can see people addressing that is to invite non-farmer, non-primary industry people onto the land to live for a certain amount of time and experience as much as that could be offered on the land to see what goes into things. And in the meantime, work there, spend time there, or even work into the operation. The landowner gets a uncorrelated income stream from visits.
Literally, they pay to stay there, you mean?
Yeah, it's different jurisdictions, different rules. Here's quite restrictive for staying on the land, but it's still a visitable place, as you've got here. It'd be a nice place to come. But no, farms and things can put people up in a little log cabin and they can stay, and it's a little bit of money. But if that covers the hay or the diesel in the tractor and it takes the sting out of these longer aims, that's the way that I think landowners are going to be able to square the circle between long-term aims with huge amounts of upfront capital and deferred gratification, or be a fiat farmer on a quarterly results thing, and you're only as good as your last quarter, and you could just have one bad winter and be selling to Morrison's. So these overlapping income streams and uses out of land. You have a primary use here as forestry. The alternative could be sawmilling and forest school. And then the contingency and emergencies could be fresh water, firewood, wood fuel, shelter, or an amenity use if people want to visit and use the facilities. And that puts money in the pocket to develop the land, becomes a better facility. I think that's where we've really starting to use this circular economy thing outside of the books and actually apply it in more duration. A Bitcoin travels around the Bitcoiners longer before it leaks out into the economy or goes onto a cold wallet. We use it to settle our transactions more and more often in use cases that have not been the first and easiest to deliver. So this would be now like a Center Parcs. Come and stay for 10 days. You're a digital nomad. You consult for a startup in Bitcoin. You can do that from anywhere in the world. Come and stay. Come and stay in Prospera. Then go over to Lugano and then stay in Wales. And by the way, we do climbing courses. Maybe we do a forestry school. Maybe there's a table that you've always wanted to build and never had the money or the competence to do it. Induct you into a workshop like you would go into a gym and build your table and tell us where to post it. And these little, we're extending our time off the public map and we're extending our time on the Bitcoin map, if you like, but the social side. So we're using our money to transact, but we're also using the land preferentially to other people. And I want to test that. And there's going to be lots of problems with that. And they're not big enough to not have a go.
How anti-fragile is it?
It's extremely anti-fragile.
Really?
Yeah, because
I was
these
thinking
trees...
it through then as you were saying it, thinking, because, look, I know...
Look where you're looking. So if we take a finger, you've got a 270-degree view of a forest that I own. And every upright tree is between 5 and 10 tons of construction material. And I'm bringing it out at cost.
Is it?
Yeah.
5 tons?
Oh, yeah.
Are they? We've just felled 7 trees at ours.
And all the weight's in the brash.
Oh,
and the
right.
water in the top.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was going to say, the trunk itself.
Softwood is, if it's cut from stump, it's 700 kilos a cubic meter. And it dries down to about 300. A lot of it's just water. But my point is that, you say, Is there much potential in the next 10 years? Look, like the gearing is insane. You are looking out, and a day of forestry would fund, at least in materials, 6 months of construction business activity.
Really?
Yeah, because it's like 60. So you did a day of forestry, say you yielded 30 tons of timber.
Can I just ask a quick question before you say this? When you see, like, I was telling you earlier, I used to have a place over West Wales, and there was just like lines and lines and lines of trees being harvested in a kind of completely different way to this, easy access, lots of roads and stuff. Are they making less money?
Yeah.
Right. Why?
Because they're doing it on a cash flow positive model. They're saying, this is the way we do it to have a consistent quarterly revenue stream from harvester rentals and sawmill sales that I don't need. So if a farmer's got land, they've got overstood trees on them, the form is to get a contractor in, pay him a tonnage, and then agree a tonnage with the sawmill, who'll come and get it. And you pay your cost to the harvester and to your incomes from the sawmiller, and you replant the land normally as a commitment under the license you've got to fell it. And they need the money straight away. They need to pay the contractor straight away. But if average farmer had the money to keep the timber on the land, now we're going into like the Safer Dean, low time preference mindset, and you said, well, timber's quite good. It's not good money, but it's not shit money. It's hard to grow. It's got an inelastic supply chain, and it's got an element of optionality in what you apply it to. So where can we put it? And if I'm a Bitcoiner and we're all talking about meshes, timber isn't a bad resource to have cornered at cost because it ships in containers as structures and can be set up somewhere with low-skilled labour in days. So the temptation here would just be to turn the sawmill valve on full and just douse the whole region in cheap sawmill timber into any business that wants to, or person that wants to buy it. But what I actually now want to do is just have enough to cover the payroll in firewood and bits and bobs, and then channel the actual capital that it's taken to get to this point and actually reserve it for things that are in that next part of the vertical. So building facilities that Bitcoiners can visit and frequent and make use of. Workspace, recreational space, and then later training.
Right, I see. So the woods, in that example you've given there, the wood becomes accommodation here, which earns a future revenue. Well,
here or anywhere that I can point the trucks, because here's got a limit of what we can build in local law, and some places don't. Prospera doesn't. So this stuff ships in containers. You don't even need concrete you need ground screws, just big silver screws that peg into the ground. You can build on ridges, you can build on beaches. It's warm in the winter, cool in the summer, and it's a 90+% timber product. It's cladded on the outside with the timber that you mill to get to the centerpiece, which is the structure. In a log, the square in the middle is what you get to for the structure. That's the strongest part. And then all the cladding that you've cut off actually puts a skin around the building. So it's a lovely, neat, balanced way to do timber. And the shipping rates aren't so high that it can't travel at that level of value across Atlantic.
That would be incredible.
Well, I love Prospera.
Do you honestly think you'll be shipping wood to Prospera?
You watch me, mate.
That's incredible.
And I feel terrible
it's literally
because
the other side of the world.
We said no pre-announcements, but it's all happening now. Like in months, this place will produce CAD signed off, machine perfect, old-fashioned timber frame structures that will ship to abroad, and we'll build a facility that people can visit Prospera, hopefully, and I've done it right, and my numbers are good. And that's my risk as an entrepreneur.
And it's better, and it's more cost effective than them milling their own stuff on the island or whatever, or don't have.
I think it's just a matter of they don't just need. It's not a matter of they're not wanting for resources over there. They're wanting for appetite for people to take responsibility on the platform.
Right.
They've built Dunas. It's a bloody 14-story, massive, fantastic project, and they need that. They need cheap accommodation for people who just want a one-bed studio. The dog's just slammed his head onto the table.
Is it a he or
it's a boy.
He wants something. He wants a bit of love, doesn't he?
He's a working dog, so he's just not used to being ignored. But anyway, yeah, Prospera. I don't like doing the pre-announcement. I've not even visited to agree where we're going, but I just can't help but be tempted to talk about where it's leading to because of how relevant it is to the people who listen frequently to you I'm doing it. It's not something I'm partnering up with anybody else. I don't need raises. I don't need really even support, but we're at a point where I just want to talk about it a little bit. That's the idea. You've seen the timber operation. It started from a forestry problem. If you apply a Stoic principle, you get a sawmill. If you keep it doing that, you can produce something even more valuable. And if you keep going and your background is in Bitcoin and we're all just renting flats in town and coming to the conferences, none of the land, none of the projects are so high that it's not worth building. And let's just see how far it goes. We've always got that option to sell into the market when I need money. And it's more tempting to do that when you've got costs to cover your fixed costs or your monthly costs. But once that's done, you've got the discretion on where to send it. It's a commodity. You send it wherever you want.
And as far as, say, expanding into other pieces of woodland, do they have to be hard to mine woods for it to be cost effective? Yeah,
that's a good bloody hell, that's a good question. And the answer is absolutely yeah. So it's like you're going back to this guns and butter economic principle. Like, what are you competitive in making? It's true of countries. Like, French are great at making wine. If the North Koreans tried to do that, it'd be relatively expensive to get to the same output. And then you, in your identity work and my business, it's like, what are we actually fundamentally good at? And really, the only thing that we can do competitively by having to deal with a local problem with the access is we produce timber of very, very high quality, very, very low unit cost. And so anything that forms a product that is high in that means that that's the head start we've got to get it to market at the right price. So anything that's made of timber is kind of the broad mandate in terms of product discovery. So we start with like the table we're sat on. This was a veteran oak that was felled because it was in the way of a road. And we milled it, we dried it, planed it, glued it together. And it's quite nice to sit on. It looks like one of the posh
It's a very posh table. No, it's a very posh table.
So why not? Why shouldn't this? If you had the option and you were a Bitcoiner, what if you were to sell this to somebody who perhaps was a consultant who stood in the way of a development that prevented it from being made, and you charged them an amount of money, or you had the option to send it to a Prospera project that you could stay long in through building some of the facilities and be a productive resident, where would you send it?
Exactly.
So I'd sell it locally if I needed the money to pay for the lads. But if we're doing that with some of the sort of more firewood level activities, the lads that are coming on to do the forestry, the sawmill and all the other things that we'll get people going on are kind of all covered by the first layer of the stack in terms of costs. And then you risk, it's like playing with the house's money with the rest of it. You ever been in the casino, you win, and you put the money that you came in with in your left pocket, and you just wander around and play with the stuff in your right pocket. Well, once all the costs are dealt with, and because there's no debt and there's no thing we're trying to reach, we've not got any big project. If we lose, we lose. It's a citadel. It is Citadel timber, and it is a fortress built business. And it can go from that position of safety. We can look at all sorts of stuff and wait many, many years. And that's what we'll do. And then if that works, the opportunity to buy more woodlands and locations is arguably easier because it's your third one.
And it's also cheaper.
Cheaper, less risk.
And it's
replicatable.
The woodlands are actually cheaper.
The woodlands are cheaper and it's replicatable. No one needs to speak to me to do this. If they're in the UK, they've got, obviously there's stuff that doesn't go well on a podcast, but there's an inside baseball game that you learn as a landowner that you just need to learn the ropes. And once you've overcome that, anything I've done here in terms of like taking a product that's normally sold at a certain level of refinement and refining it 2 or 3 more times and then delivering it directly to people, that can be replicated in farming, list them off, primary industries.
It's happening around where I live, actually. My next door neighbour, well, just from up the hill, but we've got a number of landowners around our way that are letting you use land for free pretty much if you do it regeneratively. And I think there might be some kind of government incentive there. I don't really know for sure.
No, it's more than that. The labour rates have gone up with M2 inflation and landowners don't have a lot of cash. So if you've got someone that can come on and plant some trees or knock a post in for you, it's a massive offer for a landowner.
No, but they're just grazing it. basically, in a regenerative way.
Yeah, but that's developing the land. You're deepening the soil.
Yes.
It's you'd be surprised what a landowner would accept from someone just walking
it's true.
in.
And like I say, my neighbour he's doing a number of things, but
because it's work on it again. If you're a bit older, that's not an option. Find the money to pay for that job to be done, and you haven't got it, or get a volunteer in and keep the land. Or the other option is you've got to sell it.
Well, I mean, on a small scale, and the one we are hoping to get involved in the next few months is have 2 cattle, eat one and sell one, and then get free meat.
Yep.
And my neighbour's already doing it with 2, but you could put 300 on if you wanted to. And
if you've got a network like the one that's being set up, and this is being self-organised, there's no like Bitcoin Spectre board meeting. There's people with influence and there's people with a little bit less influence, but they're all attending to the same problem, and these meshes are going to come up. And when you've got like some sort of transport service between them all, I don't think you're far off having a productive farming node, if you like, or a farming citadel, sending its beef to the bloody Norwegian location, and it's all connected. Is that it's no different from Google's campuses? It's no different than the Masons or the Scouts or any other organisation. We've got to kind of look after ourselves a little bit more than we're doing. Everything's bootstrapped except the projects, and apart from the money, and the rest of it is all bootstrapped to fiat assumptions and fiat risks. And it's like, right, we'll keep the principle going. There's still a shitload to build for us to house us. There's no point having a fantastic Bitcoin and then we're all living in like a socialist dystopia in like a not out Bitcoiner. Like, fuck that. Just start building stuff and using it inside the maps, like guerrilla, like inside of fiat maps. We're still in the rules. I've never crossed the rule on the fiat stuff ever. It's cheating. I wouldn't cheat. It's hard, but a lot of it's just follow the rules and take them literally and follow the rules and just be unequivocal, and you get what you want. I think anyway. You're not but convinced.
I am convinced. I just find the bureaucracy of it all hugely like I don't like touching bureaucracy. I don't, and farming is so captured.
That's why you've got to get. Maybe that's one of the things you've got to have a ruck with the bureaucrats. It sounds like you've got to fight in your guts, and you've got to get it out. I'm telling you, like whatever we've done here has been in the face of that regulatory shadow. I have to tend to that. I can't ignore it, and I can't ignore it because I'm not willing to give up the project's outcomes because it's intimidating. You've just got to engage with it. And that's half the problem. If you're having a fight and you're attending to that thing you're worried about or you don't like, if you're already in the mix with it, it's already half dead anyway. You've addressed it, and then you can attend to it. It moves and it changes if you keep pressure on it. I
think I have. I know what I can hone in on the exact feeling. It's this feeling of why the fuck should I deal with this shit when I'm just trying to build something here?
Well, that's it.
Like in a very good and efficient way, and trying to provide value here, and someone is basically making me put 25% of my day towards filling forms in for like what?
Well, exactly. But you're right in your thought. But like the Alcoholics Anonymous people say, when you're talking about people in a problem, it's like play it through. Like the story doesn't stop where you've stopped. So where are we now? You're in a scenario in which you feel like you've got a lot of forms that are just busy work. You're just dancing for somebody else. Yeah. But if you dance and you can build houses in 5 different other locations, it's worth it. And there's a classic example of having the choice between either being right, I shouldn't have to fill these forms out, this is a fucking job, I didn't have to do this 3 months ago, what's changed? And you're right, but you won't get your permissions. You tend to them because it's cheaper to get what you want from them. It doesn't encourage them because everything that I get from this will go into a movement and in a direction that basically opposes what I've had to fight through. But I'm not going to abdicate the challenge. If I can see a bit of daylight and it's a bit of a fight and I get all that at the end of it, then I'm going to go for it.
I suppose. So
it's your why. It's why. It's not so much, that's an embuggerance or don't you think these guys, it's none of that. Because some people can use something like that to stay on the couch all day. It could be a debilitating fear of being outside. Everyone's got a reason to proceed and not. But it's just if you want to be right or do you want to win? And if you want to win, what's worth it? What's worth filling out all them forms? There's a vision that would make you do it. And there's a vision that's poorly thought out, and it would probably encourage you to not bother. And if you've got the right why, and you know it's soup to nuts, and you know that's my identity, then you don't really need the motivation, because the forms just get filled out while you're thinking about the next job. And imagine what happens when those forms go in and get approved. What freedoms that offers to me, and how I can go into the lads on a Monday morning and say, right, lads, great news. We've just had a forestry block opened up and you can stay on full time for 2 years. And that's worth it. And it's 25 forms to a horrible whoever who's just standing in the way. And yeah, you shouldn't have to dance like that. It's pointless. It's the biggest budget item on my project in terms of outright cost for consultants and dancing. And it's also the most expensive in project management because it creates the most amount of uncertainty and chills things that I could make decisions on if the laws were clear, that I have to basically stop at an abundance of caution. They're a massive enemy, negative influence on the project. But that doesn't mean you can cry and go away and they're horrible, it's not fair, we need justice. We do need justice, but we haven't got the power, so you just fight your fight. And that's it. That's one of the biggest, go back to your lessons, is it's like, you're a bloke, no one gives a shit. You're an adult man, so pick a job that you really could stand by and no one else needs to see, that you like. Stop moaning. And that's what's been so brilliant up here for me, is there's no one, like, if something's gone wrong up here, it's my fault. And it's great. I loved it and enjoy it, and it's working so well. I can involve Bitcoiners now. I can go to them and say, I've got a job for you here. And it has got nothing to do with being a core contributor or an app or a mixer. Just building tables, mixing in a bit of Nostr tech, and just getting something out incredibly cheaply, and then privileging people I like to have access to it before a second round. And that's it. It's been fun, but it's knackering. And you wouldn't do it unless you had an identity connect to it, where you felt like personally, like your reputation was connected to it. And then the motivation stuff you just don't need. You don't need the Jocko Willink techno beat thing to just get up, because that's just the sugar boost. It's got to be something where you just really go to the wall for it. I was just very lucky that I got something that was the right size for what I thought I could take on. Not so big that I was completely overwhelmed or ruined. And it's doing all right. You're just in an interesting time.
And it was kind of like by chance, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just came back from Thailand. I wasn't in a very good state of mind, and I bought it. But
you bought it for a bit of solitude, and you actually ended up with a purpose here, right?
Yeah, and it's like this thing going like, how many people do you know identify and worship problems, and how many go a bit further and stay in the problem, which is a good thing mentally to do. Sit in how much you've fucked up, because it's your problem, and stay in it. It's emotionally uncomfortable, and then eventually that eases off and all your sad, poor me shit evaporates away, and you go, what do you want to do? Do you want to take the cut and sell? And at the time, it's probably the smart thing to do, but remember, at the time, I needed something to really, really lean into. 12 hours a day outside, hard. And then it did something for me personally, and that's why it went that way. But the original problem was loads of timber, loads of volume and no access. And so a stoic looks the dog is making approaches.
She's putting a
No,
stick.
It's a boy.
Sorry, he's putting a stick on my...
Sam.
I'm just going to chuck it out.
No,
Sam.
that's just going to... No, just
okay.
Watch this. Sam, come here. We finished. Go and lie down. No, we finished.
I won't look at him.
No, because if you throw it, you've hired him. Okay. And he will just...
He's got an insatiable appetite for fetching things.
He's a working dog, and he's full of beans. You know that phrase, full of beans? So what he's doing with you, I call bean selling. He's just full of energy, and he's just trying to hedge some of it, and he's selling beans. He just drops a stick. I don't know what we're talking about now. I'm sorry about that.
No, I was commenting that I thought it was quite lucky of you to stumble into this situation where the secondary effects, you didn't know what they were going to be.
But it was this thing about the stoic stuff is that it's great to read, and everyone loves a bit of Aurelius motivation posters. But if you actually apply it all, it's a very interesting model in which to make decisions. And the reason it worked here is because there's this enormous problem, and a Stoic would say, it's not about coping with how sad you are. I think that's something Stoic learning or Stoic knowledge gets a bad rap. It's like, how do you cope with being so sad with yourself? It's not. It's about framing a situation you're in, so that the first thing you look is that the first thing you do is not make a conclusion and just to sit in it for a minute and try and look for the opportunity in a problem. And the bigger problems always have a bigger opportunity. And the opportunity here was that because we can't move timber in the weights we want, we can mill it on site, and we solve what was a problem is now an advantage. Now we've got lots of timber marked up at a higher rate of sale, and the problem became the solution.
How do you deal then with, from a Stoic perspective, of someone fucking up on your behalf, let's say? Yeah. Someone working for this, because this is a problem I have. I'm a kind of extreme responsible person.
Yes, me too.
Like I do take on responsibility avidly, but I struggle when someone who I'm employing or someone who's working with me fucks up and it affects what I wanted out of the outcome, if you see what I mean.
I've got that a lot as well.
So
how do you deal with it?
Yeah.
Is you asking me, or I want to?
No, I'm asking you, because how I deal with it is I just suffer. I have a sleepless night. I wake up in the night and I'm like, oh, I'm gutted.
That's not good.
I try and, because really someone else, and it might have been a simple mistake as well.
Yeah.
It's not even malicious. It's a mistake. And I have to, the only thing I can think of is I've made mistakes, but it doesn't bother me because I answer to myself. But when it's someone else making a mistake on my behalf, it's just suffering. There's no way I can try and rectify. But
depends on the person. I think man management is a very difficult thing to do well over a long period of time. I think a lot of people find themselves in man management positions who've been promoted there from a technical advancement in their role, and then they're invited to run 5 more people like you. And if that skill set doesn't include soft skills, I think people really don't get the best out of technical teams because they just don't know how people individually tick. I think the answer to your question, for me, would depend entirely on the person. I've got lads here that I'd go a very long way. Like they could burn one of the machines by accident and I wouldn't actually have a crossword about that because I know them well enough to know that they don't respond well to that. And equally, there's guys that respond well to sort of quite harsh and overt criticism, and they prefer that. Then come on, mate. If you soft soap the wrong person, that can come off worse than if you just flipped your lid on the person that actually quite likes that. So a lot of it is about the person. But more generally, the workforce coming in here, I'm getting lads that are actually quite low confidence. And the instinct is always to flip your lid because it's your money that they've just wasted. But again, the wasting of money is only inside of one little part of a bigger machine. And so the wasting the money is the obstacle of the way of a Stoic. And you say, well, I'm hiring someone who's not experienced, so they're going to make mistakes. And that's in the price. If you don't take that risk on when you delegate a job, then you should be doing it. But don't lie to someone else. They're doing their best. Some lads are doing it. It just depends. You've got to define the problem. Are they being lazy? Were they lack of care? Did you over or underload them? Is it a personal problem? A lot of stuff like that here is maybe not turning the event, like if someone fucked up, I don't know how you mean, but if it was like a fuck up inside the day, it's actually about just keep the day rolling. No one's sitting like have a big bivvy circle around it and cry and over the spilt milk. It's like, right, the more dangerous thing at that point on my operation is the second mistake. Because when you've got a lad that's just fucking boobed and they're feeling sorry for themselves and the chainsaw's about to start again, 60% of their capacity is their negative talk, completely removing their ability to stay safe. So the first thought for the lads is if it really think it's something that could really get them, is to address it quick and say, right, that's that. We're done. I'm not angry. We'll pick up wherever we need to when you're feeling better about it. We're going over this way now. And so just park it, shut up, we'll cover it later. I'm not angry. We're good. And we'll do something else. And you get them to the end of that day. Then when all the feelings are down and they can visibly see you're not like, you've not disappointed them, they've not disappointed you, then you can pick it through and say, right, what happened there? And it could be, didn't sleep last night, like parents threw me out. One lad said he had the shits all day one day, and he hadn't. He'd been beaten up with scaffold bars and went out into the forest.
By who?
Just some people in a pub.
Really?
And he's a proud lad, and he's an amazing lad. He'd come on, and he was too proud to say that he'd been tatered by two dickheads with bars. And he did a full day in the forest, having just been absolutely ribs, everything. And the important thing is, he was in late, and he didn't do a good day. Well, I wasn't going to tap my watch that day. I didn't know what had happened to him, but it was good that you don't come down on people straight away. I mean, a lot of the time with blokes, they're actually labouring under bigger things and they just don't want to talk about it. If you can get to the root of what's gripping them. Got a guy who was real low confidence with numbers. So he's completely fearful of adding up. And he thought he was just completely innumerate, like genetically innumerate, but he was just shitting himself too much. He just sat down, did some basics, and he measures up now. And you get lads out of this stuff because they come into you and they might not have had a good route through life. I said before we started the jelly bean test, where you've got to leave a jelly bean on the table, and if you leave it for an hour, the experiment comes back and drops 5 in your lap. Well, the lads I tend to, by the time I get to people I want to work with, they've had the jelly bean test in life 3 or 4 times, and they've waited for the 5, and they've been robbed. So how in that, I'm the 5th person and by far the weirdest. And I'm saying, if you just stick here, it would be all this. And I'm asking them to keep that jelly bean on the table. And it's the 5th time they might have been robbed, and it's that motivation. They only come up here if they feel like they're going to get a better shake and have a better day and still go back with enough money to buy food. And so the man management side, when you say, like, what if someone fucks up and am I up all night? It's mostly about defining what the actual root problem is. Is it an actual person who is so irredeemably bad that you need to sack them? And if the answer is yes, you've got to do it straight away and be firm. I've never had to do that. It could just be a remedial thing that they just don't feel comfortable sharing. And so you just get...
What about when it's just a fuck up?
Well, it just depends what you mean.
Like someone's tasked with... I'm thinking of a particular fuck up that I had to deal with recently.
Well, without doxing the guy, like,
I'm going to put it in context of... You're building a house for a very important client.
Yep.
And someone is tasked with creating a bunch of boards for the house. And it's a very important client. And when you come to deliver them, they've all been cut wrong.
Yep. Okay.
Right. It's that.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Because you're a perfectionist. You want to deliver to someone, and you want them to go, "Wow, you did a great job," and someone's fucked it up.
Yeah, all right. So, like, straight away on that.
But you can never get the boards back either.
Oh, I know.
You can never get real boards. No, I mean, they were very specific boards that you asked for.
Well, there's a few things. I obviously can't answer directly then, because the answer to me is that I can give lads a little bit more room to make mistakes because I can produce the materials at a lower unit cost. So in one way of taking the risk of someone fucking something up for you is to have them on stuff that has a basically lower cost of rebuild. And so one way up here, just practically, is we've got just shitloads of timber and it all spits out everywhere. If someone puts a cut in the wrong place, the worst is we've lost the hours up to that point before we have to throw it on the log pile. So they're kind of like, there's always a limited downside to people who have come and paid on a daily rate. They can't wear the downside of the entrepreneur's effort. Because if it goes well, you own all the upside. So why do you need to murder them inside of their day when you're paying them for their time? So it might be the best client in the world. It's your fucking fault. You delegated the job. You're responsible for the client. You send them the invoice, not the lad. And then it's go back to the lad and you go, right, is it a personal problem? Is it a professional problem? Or what? And normally if it's cutting things like that, the process to check the lengths hasn't been done properly. Or it could be a remedial problem with the guy. He just cut them wrong. It could be that he did 10 hours of timber loading before you put a cerebral job on him at the end of the day. So you've got to kind of remove all the reasons in which it's your fault. And that's easy because they are all your fault. And you take the full responsibility of it, and not a single hint of how you feel personally about that gets to the lad, ever. Ever. They don't see me cry around the corner when something good happens, and they don't see me pissed off when something that I really needed to happen just doesn't happen, because they can't. I will never make them ride the roller coaster I'm riding.
Are any of them into Bitcoin?
They are now. I mean, it's taken years, but they're just... It's the right way to introduce people to Bitcoin. They're interested in you and how you behave. and then they say, like, what's that? What about that? I want to know more. Like, this stuff always happens here inside the day, like problem sets, things, and you can see a lad who's just completely blocked out looking at a job. She can't make a decision on it. It's like, let me have a look. It's like, well, why don't you just put that bit round there and then take that bit of metal over there and tie it on and it'll work. And like, fucking hell, like, they just don't get it. If you're a Bitcoiner, I don't know whether it's just higher level of conviction, or you just got to win, or I don't know what it is, but they just adapt to the way I want to. I
think well, what you're describing, I think, comes down to self-sovereignty again, and I think most Bitcoiners, well, all Bitcoiners, I'd say, it's a part of being a Bitcoiner is honing your self-sovereignty down, which is akin to responsibility as well.
It's total responsibility.
Yeah. And as a result, you never look at something that needs fixing and delegate unless it's easy enough. You're already looking for the answer. Like if you're delegating a problem, you know the answer already.
Yes.
You're just delegating it.
Yeah.
But you'd never give a blind problem to someone and say you sort it out.
Well, that's what I'm pushing against here in the man management. It's like task delegation, tactical, operational stuff, like to-do list, cutting list stuff is actually kind of done now. The harder part is to hand the problem off to someone and to say to a lad that just wants to be given a defined amount of work, to say, no, I'm not going to give you that anymore. I'm actually going to give you the problem I've got. And you give me the answer to that problem in whatever way you want. Don't come back to me and say, should I use that saw or that saw? Because I'm going to tell you to piss off. And I like you a lot, but I'm going to tell you to piss off. Come back when that user statement that takes up my day, you can do completely self-contained, and I'll pay you more. Because now I can concentrate on the next thing, which is even more lucrative or even more capacity to make a better decision. And you guys can do that. And that's how the military teach.
That's how you're going to bring your kids up as well, isn't it?
I don't know. I feel these kids, I don't even know who I'm having them with, and I feel sorry for them already, mate. I feel sorry for them already.
No, I'm yeah. When you've brought kids up for long enough, you realise that people that don't have kids have lots of theories about kids.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I know. I've got so many, but I've got a lot of friends that have had kids, but I think it's such a dangerous perspective, mine, because I feel like I've grown up around young families and I have close enough friends that tell me the warts and all. But I know from this that talking about it and walking the walk are not the same thing.
Dude, if it's any consolation though, it has turned out exactly how I thought it would.
Good.
Like I had all the ideas about the kind of dad I wanted to be, which I was and am, and the results are good. And
you don't need to be a motivated person. Look, that's it. That whatever that is there with the family, that's an example of what you do on your projects or yourself, right? You didn't need to be especially motivated to do that. It just had to be an important enough vision. I'm sure whenever there's problems in that, and you wanted to make changes in the family or make decisions, you went back to that image of what you set out to create before you acted again. And that is the type of vision that people need either in their identity or in a project they want to put a lot of effort into. That motivation is not enough to finish. They've got to know, like, I know I want that family finished the way I want it. And there's nothing I wouldn't put up to get that done. And that's what it takes to get the wins on the big stuff. And that, to the degree you've done that, like, is a credit to you. It's something I'm going to do, and I am nervous about it.
Well, I'll let you into another secret, and you might not like to hear this one. When you have a family, nothing else matters anymore. I mean, it kind of does. It kind of does. But it is the biggest project of your life.
Yeah.
And when I see people who don't acknowledge that, I think they're missing something.
I totally agree.
But it might be wrong, because you see a lot of businessmen and companies, people who have families, but also run massive companies and stuff, and they're obviously not seeing their kids as much as I'm seeing my kids.
It's a mass industry. The unfulfilled middle-aged exec who got to all of the academic and professional markers he'd imagined in his university days and just feels empty. It's the most common. It's a mass industry in the UK. It is meaningless exec. The bills are paid. The kids are in school, but I just feel like I'm dead already. and meaningless. It's like the most common user complaint in the UK. Half the UK is on painkillers or antidepressants. Half of the UK.
What is that a real stat?
Go and find it out for yourself. Don't trust me.
Half the
prescription medication.
Are you talking about half adults or half?
No, I think it would involve kids. I don't think you'd need to rule kids out of that stat to make it work. I think kids half.
Bloody hell.
Half. Sad or in pain.
That seems really unrealistic. Half the people in the country are taking meds for like
NHS prescriptions.
Like what?
Painkillers. So NSAIDs, which are like the ibuprofens, paracetamols, cocodamols, codeines, anything that takes the pain off. The DSM, the psychological
regularly, or
I've got a headache. Prescription.
I'm going to take paracetamol.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, like so. People don't understand that the way they make these pills available is just so insidious. So, like the DSM, the Manual for Psychology, describes chronic pain, and the definition for chronic pain is the same as for depression. They are interchangeable. So if you say I'm in constant pain, they'll treat you for depression. If you're depressed, they'll treat you as though your body's on fire. And they're the drugs that are being out on prescription. And really what they need to do is cut all that shit out. Have a scotch or whatever your thing is and write down all that stuff that you're upset about and use it as a format to attack and to address in its order. If you're irrationally scared of going out, that's your first job because it's getting in the way of all your other jobs. And you just keep doing that until you reach your personal potential. And it isn't about special people. It's about a special protocol anyone can follow. And the people that have done it way better than me often make pains to go back and say, don't make a hero out of me. I'm only making the decisions you know you need to make for yourself. So fuck off and do it. I'm not special. And we're not. But you can apply yourself on these principles and you get fantastic results. Very, very enjoyable personally. I've had a few cul-de-sac careers, like getting in, got good at something and not really liked it that much. And this I do.
I was going to say, how do you know you're not going to not like this then?
Because it's tied to this identity thing. I loved being a broker until the image and the identity of that evaporated when I learned about how that money is created and made. So I loved the work. It was a matter of intelligence and income and meaning and the social stuff. The camaraderie on a trading floor is incredible. But if the day before you were at your best, you went back in and you knew that all the money's printed out of thin air and that a 30-year treasury bond is sold on a Tuesday and bought back with printed cash on a Thursday, how'd you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and call that an economic commentary? I just couldn't do it. So there's just a complete, the identity base of that effort had been swiped. And I was just like Roadrunner off the cliff, just a Wile E. Coyote, just off. They didn't have a base of identity to do the job. And I think some people would be caught in that and be trapped. Mortgage, wife, whatever your ties are, be kind of stuck doing the job that they're compromised on.
Dude, I think for a lot of people, your children could be your base that you would justify that on.
I think that's such a big risk with kids is that you can make a decision for yourself. And then if anybody questions you on it, you say, well, we're doing it for the kids. Do you not love my children? It's a very hard thing to oppose. And I think a lot of people make decisions that are conveniently relieves them of something that they feel like they would have had to do because they're doing it for the kids. And the kids are fine.
But what about this, though? Because, I alluded to changes that are going on in my life at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I'm doing that because I know it's for the greater good.
Of the family.
Well, and me.
And you.
It's not just, I'm not being altruistic.
It's not all altruistic.
Here.
Yeah, I think
it's
that's
like
right as well.
knowing what your purpose is. I know that I want to do something else, but I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position. And that is bad for my family.
No, it's good. I think, sorry, that's a big thing to say, but I don't agree. I think you being in the arena is fantastic for the family.
Well, financially then, it will mean, it's not
clear that that's a financial problem. I mean, when you're in the arena, if you're grinding against a problem that you're in a fight with something you think's about your size, everything that comes off that is potentially lucrative. You never know where the lesson from that effort would come back in your life and be helpful. All
right, put it this way. Normally, I have an acute awareness of where I'm going. It's very simple. It's like I would call it something similar to enthusiasm. When I feel strongly enthusiastic about something, I just pursue that. And it always turns out well. Every single thing I've ever done has turned out well. In this particular instance, it's the first time in my life where I feel like I'm acting more cerebrally in this decision because I have a lot of responsibility. If it was single Tim, aged 28, I could do anything. I could do whatever I want. I could walk away. But I'm not. I have a bunch of commitments that...
Good. That's all in the price. It's all in the price of your decisions that you have to make. And I think it just goes back to what I do, is that it doesn't really matter where your fears come from. You wake up and the first thing I do is have 20 minutes on a note-taking app and then just list off all the shit that I don't feel like I've fully got my arms around. You'd be amazed the stuff that comes up as a sort of grumbly feeling you don't really fully grip. And when you get them down on paper, they either evaporate as silly or they're actually really good points that you need to look at, because it's your brain telling you, hey, listen, watch out. There's something you're not thinking about and you're ignoring me and I'm only back here, I'm watching the same thing as you, and you've got to listen to it. It's the Nietzsche thing about the shadow. The shadow? It's like the id, it's like the aggressive, venal part of your personality that just wants to run into the newsagent, steal all the chocolate, stick the girl on the till over your shoulder and run off. It's that uncontrolled, unrefined.
Which part of you?
But it's a shadow. It's the I know.
Is that what your shadow side is?
Everyone's shadow is. Everyone's got a shadow.
I know, but running into an off license and stealing
example.
A woman.
Yeah, I think I'm getting to the end of my analogies. But it's just the idea of like doing something unacceptable that you want to do, but you know is not acceptable. And the shadow part is something, again, that I think before all the Thailand stuff, I'd really just not had enough of a shadow side of me that it affected what I did. And I was just able, it never came up. But like, if you can deal with that negative side of your personality, that's one thing. It's to integrate it into who you are as a person, and you can listen to it and have the strength to listen to something that you find unpleasant, but then take it in its context and make an adult objective decision after hearing out all of the negative arguments and all the ugly, visceral stuff that you might be worried about. Just get it all out on paper. No one's going to die. All these problems have hours or days or months to work out. All you need to do is define them. I think that straight away is a good mental health thing to say, right, I've had a thing in the back of my mind, and whenever I'm so relaxed, it just keeps coming up like a beach ball out the water. Write it down. Write it all down. Find out what triggers it. Find out. You'd be surprised. And normally in that is something that you can action, and it will make you feel less bad about it because you've just acted against it. So,
I think normally I think what's unique about the current situation is I'm taking a risk which I would normally have a fallback position on.
Yeah.
Which I don't.
Okay.
I don't. Well, I probably do if I look hard enough, but it's not an obvious one. It would, like having a reserve parachute. I'm jumping with one parachute.
Yeah.
And I'm confident in myself, but normally I don't need pep talks from other people. But I've spoke to a couple of my mates recently and come away feeling stronger than when I first spoke to them. And that's unusual for me because normally, when I play poker, I win because I only bet on a good hand.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I never bluff.
That's the basics done well. Like going back to basics, that's an incredible strategy to take through poker.
I know, but it works.
It's very
you
effective.
don't win big, but you win every single time.
It's got an edge. It's what the traders call an edge. It's a more than 50% chance of a good outcome. But anyway, sorry, yeah. So you're saying that you've got this situation.
But I feel like I'm bluffing right now.
So you feel like you've got two pair, and you've got an option to push all in, and you're just not sure what the flop would show you to use
I'm trying a strategy that I'm not used to. I think that's the best way, whatever it is.
Good.
My strategy is normally like, you've got a really high chance of winning here, so just bet on that and keep betting on good. And every time you've got a crap hand, fold.
No. So I think from what little I know, and we've only spent a few hours together, like go and fuck something up. Go and do something and have an independent person tell you you're not good enough to do it, and sit in that and see if the world doesn't end, mate. If you're putting stuff on where if in your life all your projects have like 100% or 90% success rate,
yeah, they do.
It's arguably a little bit that you're setting them too easy because you've maybe afraid of failing. And it's the same.
True.
There's a lot of contractors that come up the road, and obviously with inflation, they're keeping all their prices quite low. And my advice to them straight off is, up your prices to the point where half of your quotes are turned down because they're too expensive. You'll get 50% of the best payers. You'll increase your margins to the point you can keep trading. And yeah, the feeling of putting in a price that's a little bit too high is offset by the ones. And it's the same with risky projects. So if you're setting off on something that's slightly, doesn't have the same outcome as the ones that you've already, okay, fine. It's okay. You don't lose from the thing that you're trying to avoid. You also win from a fail. So I failed here, but you can use the momentum of it to push into wins that you didn't expect to get. The point is you've got to drop into the half pipe. That's the alive human part. What you do, whether you face it to the bottom or you do a backflip on the other side, is really just a story of the project. You'll always get a project win. It's gone out the way we expected. We got our money back. We got a bit of money on top. Or it failed, and there's a suite of things we can take from that to carry into the next project. There's really no losers from that. I would be a little bit more risk on than I would have been a few years ago, because I've failed enough now that it doesn't hurt. It's just like a dead nerve.
But what about, though, if your failure has effects on other people? I mean, I suppose it does here, is where you've got employees and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, there's a big difference between me, the single guy in my 20s, and me, the familied up guy in my 50s.
That's
you know?
right. Oh, no, it goes without saying. Like, I've got conservative responsibilities here now. I've got lads that we've built up some trust, and they absolutely need to keep coming up here and working. And a lot of the projects I'll turn down now because they're too speculative, and I've got other people to think of. It's just about making it very clear where people are coming up and what I want from them, and being totally honest about that. If they're on a fixed rate, it's my risk. If it's too big a project for me to pay for, there's a share in the upside or all of the upside, and we agree it. And then if the project fails, as long as everybody's got their arse covered, one guy just needs the money for the time. He doesn't care if it goes well, but he will help on it for money. Then if that's what that guy's incentive structure is, that's what you match. You might have a guy that doesn't actually need the money, and he'll do it as a side project, but he wants 10% of the upside, and you can make it work. And then if it does, you haven't let anybody down. You were clear from the start about who won where and what that risk or cost was to them. And again, you can have an orderly end of an unsuccessful project that still has a recoverable huge value. And sometimes they're successful. They didn't meet the objective that you set off on. It changed during the plan, and you still got out and won and learned a lot from it. So I'm not saying for you to bowl off and take huge risks. But if you're a slam dunk guy and you don't like it bouncing off the hoop, as it were, just do one on a small, make that the problem. And say, I just need to be more comfortable with not getting to where I expected to, and realising that no one dies. And that might mean that I can be a bit more, what's the word? Aggressive.
Intrepid.
Yeah, intrepid. And the other thing, as from a trading side with risk, is the other thing you can do whenever you want is control the position size. If you think something's too risky, cut the size down. That's what we say to new Bitcoiners. Buy what you can afford to lose. Take the amount that you think you've saved in excess and you don't need, and cut that amount in half, and then cut it in half again and buy that amount of Bitcoin. As long as you've got a non-zero amount of upside, it doesn't really matter if you've got lots and lots or a little bit. You've got non-zero, and for you, if it's projects, just have one that you think, I'll never hit the bullseye on that one, and just see. That may be crap advice.
Well, I've never heard it. Put it that way.
Well,
I've never heard it as advice. That's like it's a bit like we were describing earlier. It's a strategy. Is throw out a bunch of highly unlikely things with a lot of upside, and just let one of them win.
You only need one to win.
I know, but does that work on an individual level? It's more of a.
I think the question is around ergodicity, this idea that a sample is representative of a range, and you're saying, well, is your anecdotal experience of doing this representative of it as a strategy? And then it's a hard question to ask, because I could say it works for me.
But how are you doing that here, for example? With products or with what? I mean...
Taking risk, do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, that strategy of, like, throw a bunch of, take a lot of risks with very small risks with high outcome, and just let one of them out of 20 win, and that's good enough.
Well, land ownership's owning a suite of options. I mean, we buy land that's got a price today, and that price reflects how little we can do with the woodland under law. But the laws can change. So the value of, let's say the value of the mining operations here is 0 in the market because no regulator in the right mind will let you mine. Okay. But the same law that banned it might unban it in my grandchild's lifetime. And we own the option. We're deeply out the money option. Nothing we do in the day has got anything to do with serving the upside of a mining use case on this land. And yet the option's worth 0.01p. And it's in a wallet of assets that will go to someone I might not even ever meet. And it might move into the money. They might be like, right, we do need rock from national economy because we're at war. So you're allowed to mine again now. And you paid 0 for that because what you bought was serving a market that only wants to drop logs off at roadside to go into a massive sawmill. And you own all the options, not just the one that pays in the market.
I enjoy listening to the lexicon of the way you speak because it's very connected to your past in finance. And actually, I've only shown an interest in that world in the last sort of
it's a means to an end. That everything I say in finance is just borrowing the words from one game, which is playing the price of a market, which is a level 2 chaos system. You can't predict it. And applying it to the other thing that's level 2 chaos is your life.
Yeah, but I never had the experience in the market. I mean, I since I discovered Bitcoin, I have followed these kind of things. And it was astonishing for me to realize that finance I thought it was boring. And, I was in the creative industries, let's say. And I looked at that lot and thought, oh, boring.
Yeah, it is.
And then, no, it wasn't though.
Well, yeah.
When I discovered it, I realized it was a blueprint. It was like a framework of life. You could watch a market and you could see how human beings are.
Yeah. And
you could, and I was like, God, how did I miss this? I'd have loved a whole life in finance, I think, actually, maybe, because I'd love to have a life in finance now, but obviously no one's going to employ me in finance. But
it's all great, but you'll hate your guts.
No, but you can be involved in allocating capital in whichever way you want.
Yeah, of course you can, and that's actually there are ethical participants in the market. I think hedge funds are one of the examples. These standalone. Obviously, there's lots of bad things hedge funds do, insider trading and stuff. But just as like their participation, all they're doing is dampening volatility in the market. If the corn price dumps on a weather headline, it's the hedge fund buying the dip and it reduces the volatility, and they do that and they sell into toppy markets. MicroStrategy got shorted when it stretched too far from a valuation model, and they do good work generally. I saw the financial market like an archery board. That was the one visual hook that kept me, and I was in the bullseye as a broker croupier. And the outer ring were banks, and they'd come into our bullseye to net commodity component shapes of the financial products amongst each other, and they would turn to the next outward ring, which is the hedge funds, the pension funds, the big businesses, and create bespoke financial products for them to hedge whatever risk they had. So they were the banks were like a mechanical garage. They'd produce complicated cars for the customer, but they would buy and sell and trade with me in the component parts for those cars. So they would put on like a complicated exotic interest rate structure because the company that wanted it had receipts in Japanese yen and had costs in Aussie dollar. So the bank would create a product that indemnified that customer against swings in that, even that they don't want to be involved in because they're just a shoe company. So they don't want the FX risk. So the bank hedges their FX risk and says, that's solved. If dollars go up, we pay you on this. If dollars go down, you lose, but you save on your business operation. It's a hedge. And they'd turn around to the other banks and say, right, we've just done an exotic product to hedge that on our desk so that we're not the opposite side of that trade. I'll buy treasuries, I'll sell yen, whatever, fixed income, and that renders the deal I've done with the customer profitable.
But where does the profit come then?
It comes from the price that you offer the car at is more than the component parts and the assembly of that bespoke product. Right. So the trader would say, okay, your alliance, whatever, you've got fertilizer exposure in Kazakhstan and you've got dollar customers. So we'll put a product together that what the business wants is we just make fertilizer product and move it. The currencies are a problem for us. Like, I don't want to have to spend 5 years making fertilizer and then lose it all on a currency swing from a central banker that just pisses off into the wind, and I've lost all my money. So the banks and these financial institutions go to them and say, right, that's your problem set. We'll underwrite, as in the insurer, all the risk of what you've just described in this contract. But they don't carry the risk. They turn it into the inner ring, and they buy the large component parts that offset that risk to the customer. And the price they sold the bespoke suit at is the spread that pays for their desk, and that's called flow business.
And you can't lose money doing that.
You can't lose money in the market doing that because the market risk is hedged. You've just sold a car and you've bought back a bonnet, upholstery, and body panels, and you're still short the wheels. But that's what the trader's discretion is on the desk, is to say, okay, well, I actually know that there's more of this happening, and I'll just be slightly exposed to that. But they never take full risk outright on it. The hedge funds might. They'll take an outright risk.
Do you think, I take it you run your business with all these same information
Absolutely,
at play?
yeah.
And do you think you will beat the average wood miller?
Oh,
because,
absolutely. So there's, have you heard of a film called Margin Call?
Yes, I know.
Have you watched it?
I have, actually, yeah.
Okay, so Jeff, sorry to anybody listening who hasn't. It's a very authentic, it's not the most exciting film, but I worked in the bank at the time that was set. And it's very accurate. It's very authentic.
They have to make a tough decision at the end.
Yeah, it's like you say about Saving Private Ryan. It was very authentic infantry scenes. Like that, people who were there said that's actually pretty close to how it really was. And I'd say that Margin Call is the most authentic piece of cinema for what exactly happened in the financial crisis. And I mention it because Jeremy Irons' character is like the guy that gets flown in on the helicopter. He says something that's so interesting, so right. He says, I've been in a long time, something I'm going to paraphrase. It's like, I've had a long time in this business and there's only a few ways to make money. Be first, be smarter, or cheat. And I don't cheat. And when you come back to the competitiveness in this, I'm not a particularly good sawmiller. I'm a very shit forester. I can just about drive the tractor. But I can get the timber to roadside cheaper. And I don't need to be clever or skillful. I'm first, not smarter. And I don't cheat either. So this competitiveness just comes from how you set up. A tree, we have a day rate that takes a tree down a day rate labourer takes a tree down. And the gearing in the product is one which the bulk breaks over time. And the value of that bulk goes up over time. And so as long as you pass it through 2 or 3 of those gates, you've got enough to sell it to that pays for all of the other parts. It's a bit like the supermarkets sell bread and milk for a loss because they know you're going to come in and buy a cake. And they make 40% on that. So I make markup the more developed, we can push it down the value chain. But the initial thing was just to cover the cost of forestry, and I've just romped through a couple more because the same thing that worked for the initial fix worked for the upside.
Fascinating. Dude, we've been talking for...
Talking of shortfall.
3 hours.
Talking of shortfall, I'm dying for a week.
Yeah, me too.
That's an uninsured, unhedgeable position. Trust me.
3 hours, 10
We've
minutes.
Gone some.
So we better finish it off here, and then we can both go to the loo.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like I want to talk more, obviously.
Well, you're welcome back. We don't have to call it one.
I'm fascinated by the way your mind works because it's different to mine. Not that different, actually, but you've had a lot of different experiences to me. So.
Well, that's the thing. You can't be so different from someone. Like, that's the Bitcoiner problem. You can't be so alien to someone else that they're not credible. You've got to have an overlap in them. Otherwise, then you're not really worth listening to.
Well, there certainly is. But there's a lot of things you talk about that I can't keep up with because I'm trying to understand new concepts. But it doesn't matter. It's all good. Mm-hmm. But I
think you've been a pretty bloody good sport.
What do you mean?
Well, this stuff is so obscure.
No, and I like understanding things, and I like things on the fringes.
It's not an idea. I'm not punting an idea. I mean, that's the only defense I have is that I don't know if this stuff is right or if someone else has done it more intelligently in a different philosophy. But I'm just doing it on what you can see in front of you and around you, and that's really all I can offer in terms of encouragement to think like this. But I like it, and it's working for me at the moment. Yeah,
well, that's all that actually really matters. I mean, you don't want to take advice off someone who's not doing what you want to do or winning or because otherwise it's going to be bad advice.
And I don't mind them disagreeing with how I go about doing this, but you can't really argue with the outputs. They make an empirical argument that lots of chatting and arguing would never make. If we're sat on a table we've done this process with, it's quite a strong argument, isn't it? You don't need to know anything about me. It's like you either sit on it and it falls apart and it's crap and ugly, or it's gorgeous and you sit on it and it's lovely. So you sort of go by like, judge me by my fruits in this little bit I've been doing this. But no, it might not completely easily translate to other people. But
the bigger picture is interesting as well, because there's been a few concepts in the last few years that are arising that you sometimes have to blag it a little bit with an idea. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah,
but you've got this sense of this thing.
I think it's a sense of loyalty. I think when you have that first idea, it's like, do I fall in love with it? And if I do, what do I have to give up to see it happen in reality? And you have different relationships with different ideas. I think if you start with a weak idea, no amount of motivation is going to get you through seeing something that you don't really care whether it happens or not. It's that one that you just get up and you itch. And there's always 5 jobs that you could have done yesterday that you've got to get done. And it's got to happen because you've got to see this happen. And you've got to see it through. And that's the projects that you want to be in your life. I wish I could just fill my life with them, but they come along infrequently.
Yeah, well, look, it's a great project, mate, and thanks for inviting us up here. It's a lovely spot.
You're welcome anytime you like.
And I'll go home and I'll think about all this stuff, and then I'll be back in a few weeks and I'll have about 100,000 more questions.
Well, I want you to come back because there's so much that I've held off saying because it would be like a pre-announcement or involve an element of risk where it doesn't happen. But the more often you come back, there's more that I can say retrospectively. And I'd love to do that because it's a critical time. It's a great time to come and visit. But the water hasn't quite come out the hose yet. It's a bad analogy. Maybe it's just that we both need a wee so much. But it's not really rocking. I think Freud would have a go at me. No, it's about to be something I can talk about in the present tense. But I've just seen too much stuff in Bitcoin about pre-announcements, and
the announcements or whatever, dude. I like the
theory
behind.
Not happened.
Well, I am more interested in the reality of doing these things. I'm not necessarily that concerned about the future, because I think what a lot of, and I know this from my Bitcoiner friends, lots of Bitcoiners I know want to be involved in the Bitcoin world professionally, let's say, and for a long time that's been coding and things like that.
Direct.
Occasionally you get marketing now and a little bit of this and that, but your average, but there aren't many things. But what people are starting to realize is that the Bitcoin world is now the world.
Well, it depends how you want to be employed. Do you want to be employed in Bitcoin or do you want to be employed in Bitcoiners?
With Bitcoiners, yeah.
Because
exactly.
we aren't the same. Like, you can work and push code and make a program better and better, but you're never, ever going to get something that dematerializes you into the router and you enjoy the same protection as your money. Fucking realize that and accept it, and then this next bit that we're talking about will bring people who aren't coders, who are Bitcoiners, and we'll build it how we want it and use it and pass it on. I think that's coming. I just think that's just gonna happen. So I'll do my little bit, and I'll partner up with people I think I can partner up with, but I'm never going to rely on anyone else because it's too serious. My thing I've got on, I feel very strong sense of ownership, and I want to get it to where I want to get it to. If I can get help, I will, but
Well, hallelujah to that, and thanks again for chatting.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate your time, mate, and
catch up
good
again
luck
soon.
with the future.
Thank you, and you, mate. Take care.